Today we're taking you deep into the heart of Texas, where empty highways stretch for miles and unsettling encounters lurk around every bend. From the eerie glow of unknown lights to the chilling whispers of lost souls, this 3-hour journey will dive into true, terrifying encounters on some of the most desolate roads in the Lone Star State. But before we start our journey through these dark and deserted Texas highways, here's something you might want to know. Most viewers make one huge mistake. They leave without subscribing. And by doing so, they miss out on spine-chilling stories that will keep them up at night. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because tonight the terror on these Texas highways is just getting started. So, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Let me know in the comments, because as the night unfolds, the darkness on these highways will only get deeper. Now buckle up and let's hit the road, because the most unsettling stories from Texas are about to unfold. My name is Robert Calhoun, and I'm from a little place called Alpine, Texas. It's one of those towns you don't hear much about unless you're headed out toward the Big Bend. Or maybe if you're looking for the start of a long haul across the desert. I've been a truck driver for most of my life, always on the road, always out there. The kind of job that gives you a lot of time to think. You get to know the land, the feel of it. And the way the wind blows across that stretch of desert highway, well, it's almost like it knows your name. That night, though, it felt different. Like the wind was trying to tell me something. But it was just me, my rig, and the empty stretch of FM 170. I was on a late-night run, heading back from someplace near Terlingua. Those desert roads get to be real quiet after the sun goes down. The kind of quiet where your mind starts to wander, and you begin to wonder if you're the only one left awake out there. The sky was a deep, dusty purple, and the road shimmered under the fading light of the sun. I was coming up on that curve, just past the ghost town, where the highway seems to stretch on forever, the kind of place where you wouldn't expect to see anyone, not for miles. I'd made that drive hundreds of times, and it always felt like the same empty stretch of asphalt. Nothing but the sound of my truck's engine and the occasional hum of the radio. The wind that night had a heaviness to it, like it was carrying something. I couldn't tell you what exactly, but you could feel it pressing against the cab, almost like it was trying to whisper to you. I pulled a long breath, trying to shake off the feeling that the air was different. But it didn't matter much. I was just another guy making his way through a long stretch of nothing, trying to forget a few things. The way you do when you're driving alone for too long. My divorce, the mess of custody battles, the miles between me and my kids, it all just kind of fell away when I was on the road. The hum of the engine, the steady rhythm of the tires on the asphalt, it was easy to get lost in that. I didn't see him at first, not until my headlights hit the figure standing right in the middle of the lane. He was just standing there, still as a stone, like he had nowhere to go. At first I thought it might have been an animal or maybe a man with a broken-down vehicle, but as I got closer it became clear. There was no movement, no cars in sight, nothing ahead of me but the long, empty road stretching into the night. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching against the pavement, and my heart skipped. But when I came to a stop and the truck's engine rumbled to a low idle, the figure was gone. No footprints in the dust, no sign of movement. Just the road ahead and the wind whispering through the mesquite. I figured I'd just imagined it, some kind of shadow trick played by the headlights. I let out a breath and checked my mirrors. Nothing. I rubbed my eyes, trying to clear the fog out of my head. But even though I told myself it was nothing, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The way the wind had picked up. The way the headlights had caught something in the road just for a second. I let it slide. It was a long drive, and sometimes your mind starts to play tricks. I turned the radio up a little, trying to drown out the quiet buzzing in my brain. But when I passed that same stretch of road a little while later, there he was again. The same figure standing just ahead, like he hadn't moved a muscle. No cars around, no signs of life except for that man, standing still in the lane. This time, I didn't hit the brakes. I didn't even slow down. Something inside me told me not to. Something told me that if I stopped again, I wouldn't like what happened next. so I just kept driving. And when I looked in my rearview mirror, he was gone. Just like before. But there was something more that didn't sit right. I checked the odometer the way you do when you've been driving for a while and noticed that the miles hadn't added up like they should have. I thought maybe I'd misread it, but when I checked again, sure enough, it hadn't moved. I turned the wheel a little, looking at the road signs to make sure I hadn't missed a turn. But there I was, stuck in that same stretch of road, miles from where I should have been. I wasn't sure if it was the tiredness or something else, but when I looked at the map, the loop of FM 170 seemed to stretch on, and no matter how far I drove, I kept coming back to that same spot. At that point, my pulse was picking up, and I couldn't tell if it was the heat or the eerie stillness of the desert surrounding me. I pulled off to the side of the road, shut off the truck, and sat there in the dark, listening to the wind. The engine ticked softly as it cooled, but all I could hear was the wind shifting through the mesquite, the occasional creak of the truck's metal frame. I don't know how long I sat there. Could have been minutes, could have been hours, but after a while I heard it. Soft footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from behind the cab. Not fast, not rushing, just a quiet, steady pace that didn't quite make sense. I turned around, but there wasn't a soul in sight. No shadow, no shape, just the road stretching out into the night. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I didn't even think twice. I fired up the truck, slammed the gas, and took off. Didn't care about the route, didn't care about anything but getting out of there. I never did drive that way again. I'd like to say it was just a bad night, that I was just tired, that it was all in my head. But I can't shake the feeling that something was watching me out there. Something that had always been there, waiting. And sometimes, when I think about it, when I'm lying awake in my bed in the middle of the night, I can almost hear those footsteps behind me, soft but sure, like they've been there all along. I don't know what it was, I'm not sure I want to know. But I learned that night, sometimes you just don't ask too many questions, especially when you feel like something's been waiting for you all that time. I don't go down FM 170 anymore. I don't even look at the road signs when I'm near it. Some things you just leave alone, and sometimes when I drive through the desert, I can still feel the wind, like it's trying to say something. I reckon I'll never know what it's trying to say. My name is Jesse Miller, and I'm from a small town near Sonora, Texas. I've been a freelance photographer for about 7 years now, and the road's been my home more often than not. I've driven across the state so many times that I've lost count. Some nights, when the moon's high and the stars are just a blur above the black highway, I'll pull into a rest stop, grab a coffee from the vending machine, and take a break. It's just part of the rhythm, a thing I've gotten used to over the years. It wasn't a big deal. This one night, though, I was driving late. Too late, probably. But that's how it goes. It was one of those nights where the air feels dry, even when you're inside the car with the AC running, the kind of dry air you can taste. The highway had been empty for miles, the only noise coming from the tires humming against the asphalt. You get so used to the silence that you forget the world's even out there. So I pulled into the rest stop just past mile 86. It's an old place, nothing fancy. The kind of stop you see on the side of the road when you're too far from anywhere else to care. The lights flickered a bit as I parked, but that didn't make me think much of it. I've seen it happen plenty of times. I killed the engine, grabbed my camera bag, and made my way to the bathroom. I didn't need to go, but the place was empty, and I figured it wouldn't hurt to stretch my legs a bit. When I walked inside, the first thing I noticed was the hum of the hand dryer. It's an old one, the kind that's louder than it should be. And I remember thinking, why is it even on? I haven't seen anyone in here. But I didn't really give it much thought. I went to the sink, splashed some water on my face, trying to shake off the tiredness. The light overhead flickered a couple times, and I swear the hand dryer cut off and then started up again right after. It's funny how when you're alone you start noticing things that don't quite fit. A noise, a flicker. The kind of stuff you brush off in the daylight, but out there in the dark it feels different. I finished up and stepped back out into the dimly lit rest stop. My truck was still parked where I left it, but something felt off. I don't know how to describe it. Maybe it was just the quiet or the way the wind had picked up, but I had the oddest feeling that I wasn't alone. I looked around the rest stop and saw a car parked in the far corner, headlights off but still there. It was an older model, something beat up. It didn't look like it belonged there, but I figured it was just someone else passing through. I didn't think much more of it. Just locked up the bathroom and turned to head back to the truck. As I walked to the door, I glanced back at my rearview mirror. That's when I noticed it. The same car still there, parked exactly where it had been before. No sign of movement. No one walking around, just the car sitting there, like it had been waiting for something. I told myself it was nothing. Could be just another traveler like me. But when I looked again, that car was still there. Still. And it felt like the kind of stillness that goes beyond just quiet, like everything in that moment had stopped moving. I shook it off. Walked back to my truck, started it up, and pulled out of the rest stop. I glanced at the rear view again, but the car was still there. It hadn't moved an inch. I kept driving, but the weirdest thing happened. A few miles down the road, I looked again, just out of habit. The car wasn't in my rear view anymore, but it felt like it was there, watching me. It was a feeling that crawled up my back, a tightness in my chest. I convinced myself it was just the dark playing tricks. So I kept driving, but I couldn't shake the feeling. It's like I could feel something behind me, and every time I glanced back, it was there. Just out of view, but always there. I told myself to stop being ridiculous. But then, about 20 miles later, I had to stop for gas. The station's one of those run-down places on the side of the road, flickering lights and nothing much else. I stepped out of the truck to fill up, and as I turned around, I saw it. The same damn car parked across the lot from me. That's when the hair on my neck stood up. There was no way it had gotten there so fast. No way it had passed me without me noticing. I stood there, staring at it for what felt like hours, my heart pounding in my chest. But as I walked toward the station to pay, I saw the car's engine hood was warm. I mean, it was still warm, like someone had just been in it. Nobody was in the car. I've never been good at explaining things like that, but I knew something wasn't right. Something had been watching me. I don't go to rest stops anymore, not after that. No matter how far the drive, I can still feel that hum of the dryer, the flickering light, and the quiet pull of that empty car waiting for me. Like it was always there, just behind the dark. You ever have that feeling that someone's there even when you can't see them? That's how it felt that night. And every time I drive by that rest stop now, I can't help but think I still hear that damn hand dryer, humming in the quiet. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks. Or maybe there's something about those roads that makes you see things. I don't know. But I still dream about it. Still hear that dryer humming even though I'm miles away. My name is Clint Dorr, and I'm from Eden, Texas. It's not much of a place, really. Just a speck of dust along Highway 87. You've probably passed it without even knowing. I don't mind that, though. It's quiet here. Quiet enough to think. Quiet enough to remember things I try not to. I was heading out early that morning, just like I always did when I worked a job up north. Early morning was my time. The kind of time when the world's still asleep and the air's cool enough to breathe deep. I'd had my coffee and my old truck was stubborn as usual. She started, but only after a couple of tries and a good yank on the gas pedal. She'd been with me for years. A 1987 Chevy, not much to look at, but she'd done right by me. The sun wasn't even thinking about coming up yet, and the sky was still that dark navy, like it hadn't made up its mind whether to hold on to the stars or let the light take over. The wind had that early morning chill, just enough to make you wish you'd worn a jacket. I had the windows cracked a little. I liked hearing the sound of the tires on that old highway, just that hum of rubber on asphalt, the occasional click of the turn signal, and the soft rattle of the truck's frame. The road stretched out like a ribbon, quiet as could be. No lights in sight, just me and the endless stretch of blacktop. I was listening to the radio. It was a local station, nothing fancy. The DJ had a voice like gravel, slow and thick like he had all the time in the world. That morning he was rambling on about some local news, but I wasn't paying much attention. Not until I heard something that made me sit up a little straighter. "The roads are clear this morning, folks," the DJ said. "But we've got a report of a fatal crash just ahead, along Highway 87. If you're heading north, you might want to take it easy." I thought nothing of it at first. Just another accident on the highway. Happens all the time, especially with the way folks drive around here. They think they're invincible or something. But then the man's voice crackled for a second, and I caught a word that made my gut twist. Fatal. I didn't pay it much mind, figuring it was just one of those things. It's always someone else, right? Always someone else who's involved in the bad stuff. But when the radio signal sputtered again, just like it does when you drive through a bad patch of road. The DJ's voice turned into static for a moment. Then, a second later, it was like he was saying something else. The static filled the truck, buzzing loud and sharp. I reached over and turned the dial, but the static wouldn't go away. That's when I started feeling a little off, like something was tugging at the edges of my thoughts. I turned the volume up, thinking maybe I'd missed something, and sure enough, just as I was about to switch the station, I heard it clear as day. "License plate," the voice said, still cutting in and out. "License plate number 378. I froze. My stomach dropped. I didn't know why, but something in me knew, even before I thought it, that the next part was going to hit hard. The radio buzzed again, louder this time, a hum that shook the truck. Then, just like that, the signal cut out altogether, and I was left in the dark with only the hum of the engine and the quiet night. For a second, I thought about changing stations. I even reached for the dial, but my hands felt heavy, like I was stuck in place. Something made me keep listening. I couldn't explain it. That gut feeling again, I shook my head. The road ahead was still empty. No sign of a crash. Nothing at all. I was miles from anything, and the world felt like it was holding its breath. But then, out of nowhere, a flash of light up ahead caught my eye. I squinted through the windshield, and the headlights caught something. A dark shape, sprawled across the road like it had been there for a while. I didn't know what to think, but my hands tightened on the steering wheel. The closer I got, the clearer it became. A wreck, a real one. And there in the middle of it, a piece of metal caught the light, shining in a way it shouldn't have. I slowed down, real slow. I pulled up next to the wreck. There were no people, no one around. Just the remains of an old sedan, twisted and bent, the front end smashed in. A familiar kind of wreck, one you get used to seeing out here. And then I saw it. On the broken bumper, just barely visible in the light, was the license plate number. It was mine. I don't know how it happened or why it was there, but there it was. 378. The same exact number the radio had mentioned. It wasn't a coincidence, I can tell you that much. My heart started to pound. I got out of the truck, but the air felt thick, like I was walking through molasses. The world around me got quieter the closer I got to the wreck. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like the place was waiting, watching. I didn't even touch the wreck. I didn't want to. I didn't have to. I could feel the weight of it, the wrongness of it. The silence was suffocating. I stood there for a few moments just looking at it. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping it would go away, but it didn't. It just stayed there like it had always been there, waiting for me to see it, waiting for me to remember something. I didn't even look back when I climbed back into the truck. I couldn't. It was like if I looked away, I'd lose something I couldn't get back. I started the engine and it roared to life without a hitch. The radio crackled again as I pulled away. The same static, the same hum. But now, every time I drive that stretch of highway, the radio finds me. No matter what station I turn it to, no matter what I do, it's always there. The buzz, the crackle, the same voice, the same license plate number, like it's chasing me. I've tried changing the station, but it always finds me. It never lets me forget. I don't know if it's a warning or if it's just something that's stuck with me. But I do know this. I don't drive that stretch of road at night anymore. And I don't listen to that radio station. I don't think I ever will again. I'd rather let the silence stay, because I know deep down that whatever it is, it's still waiting, still out there, always just a little behind me. My name is Marty Ellis and I'm from Troop, Texas. Now, I've lived here most of my life, worked as a mechanic over at the old shop near the gas station, and spent more nights than I care to count sitting on my porch watching the sun go down over the creek. It's a simple life, one you get used to, but there's things, old things that you never really forget. And that trip with Ray, well, it sticks with me. I don't talk much about it, but I reckon now's as good a time as any to tell it. It wasn't anything big, at least not at first. Just a weekend fishing trip like any other, out there by Sabine Creek. You know, the back roads off 110, past the old mill, right where the highway starts to fade into the woods. Ray and me used to do it every summer. Head out in his old truck with a cooler full of beer, a couple rods, and not much else but the sound of the water and the wind in the trees. No agenda, just fishing and swapping stories till we couldn't tell day from night. Funny thing about it, though, is how little I remember about the first day. It was the second day that changed everything. Ray, he was always the jokester, you know, real loud and full of energy, especially when we'd been drinking a few. But that second night, something about him seemed off. I didn't say anything at first. I figured it was just the heat or the beer getting to him. We set up camp just south of the creek, near that old cottonwood that's been standing there for God knows how long. The air was still, and you could hear the bugs singing their songs rising and falling with the wind. I set the tent up while Ray cracked open another beer. It's quiet out there in East Texas in a way you wouldn't expect. The hum of the world slows down and the night just kind of settles over you like a blanket. We didn't talk much that evening, just fished, drank, and sat by the fire. But when we turned in, that's when I noticed something strange. Each morning we'd wake up to find a few beer cans had been moved around the campsite. I didn't think much of it at first. Wind could have blown them, or maybe an animal had knocked them over. We'd both been half drunk the night before, so I figured it was just one of those things. But as the days went on, it started happening more. Each morning I'd find the cans a little farther away from the fire, like they'd been dragged. At first Ray laughed it off. Probably a raccoon or something, he'd say, grinning like he hadn't a care in the world. But I noticed his eyes. He'd look at the cans like he didn't want to touch them, like they didn't belong. I remember one night, the sound of the cicadas grew louder, almost deafening, like the whole woods was alive with them. Ray had gone to bed early, said he had a headache. I stayed up a bit longer, sipping on some coffee, watching the fire burn low. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps, soft but clear, coming from just beyond the tree line. Now, I'd been out there plenty of times before, and I know the sounds of the woods well enough. But this wasn't an animal, no. These steps, they were too heavy, too deliberate. I couldn't see anything, but I felt it, something moving out there, watching. I don't know how long I sat there, but I remember thinking that maybe it was just my mind playing tricks. I went to bed, and in the morning I didn't say anything to Ray. But he seemed a little more on edge too, like he'd been listening to something just out of his reach. The next morning we packed up early. It wasn't even light out yet, but Ray was already up, gathering his things. I tried to shake off the feeling that something wasn't right, but it was there, like a cold breath on the back of my neck. We climbed into his truck and I went to grab the keys out of his bag, but they weren't there. I didn't think much of it, not at first. I figured Ray just misplaced them. He laughed, patted his pockets, and we both looked around the campsite, but there was no sign of them. We searched for a while, moving around the fire pit and over by the creek, but nothing. I wasn't too worried at first, not like Ray. He got real worked up, you know. He kept saying they must have rolled under the truck or something, but I told him to calm down. It wasn't like they could just vanish. But after a couple hours, when we still couldn't find them, I started to get that feeling again, the one I couldn't shake. It wasn't until we'd both given up and were about to head back to town that we noticed the marks. There was something dragging by the edge of the creek, like a long, slow line in the dirt, leading out into the water. It wasn't a tire mark or something from a car, it was something else. And that's when I got real cold. I don't know why I didn't say anything at the time. Maybe I was too scared, maybe it didn't make sense, but I had this terrible feeling, like something had come too close to us. Something we couldn't see. Ray's eyes kept darting around like he was looking for someone or something. But when we checked the water, there was nothing. No sign of the keys, nothing to explain it. We got in the truck, drove back to town, and by the time we got there, I could see Ray had gone quiet. Real quiet. Like he was holding his breath. The police found Ray's keys a few days later, down in the mud right where we'd camped. They said they must have just fallen in the creek, but I don't believe that. I've seen the creek plenty of times, and there's no way they'd just sink like that. They weren't there when we left, but they were when the cops got there. And Ray never went back out to that spot. He left town not long after, said he was headed out west. I never saw him again. Now every time I drive by that stretch of road near Sabine Creek, I get that same cold feeling. You know the one where you're sure someone's there even though you can't see him. I tell myself it was just a trick of the mind, just a couple of odd things happening at once. But deep down I know better. Sometimes I think I still hear the footsteps in the trees when I'm out there, and I know I'll never get rid of the feeling that something's watching me from the other side of the creek. Ray's keys are still in the mud somewhere waiting. Maybe they always were. My name's Wyatt Larson, and I'm from a tiny place called Leona, Texas. I don't expect you to know it. It's the kind of town you blink past if you're not paying attention. You'll find it just off Highway 90, not far from the edge of the hill country where the land rolls in all kinds of directions and the trees are mostly mesquite, thorny, and dry. Folks around here are used to quiet, It's the kind of quiet that stretches across miles of land where the only thing you hear at night are the wind and the occasional coyote calling out in the distance. There's nothing to disturb it, nothing to remind you that the world outside is speeding along. That's how I've lived most of my life, just going about my business, keeping my head down, working at the feed store and minding my own business. But sometimes, things happen when you least expect them. And sometimes they happen in places you think you know better than your own skin. The first time it happened, I was 32 and it was a summer night, hot as hell. The kind of night that makes everything feel like it's about to burst into flames. I was coming home from a late shift at the store, the sun long gone and the moon already high in the sky. I'd taken my usual route home, a small 2-lane road that runs parallel to the old railroad tracks and leads straight out to my little farmhouse. I've driven it 1,000 times, maybe more. The only thing that ever changes is the weather. And the weather around here changes about as often as a tumbleweed rolls across the dirt. It's the kind of road where you can't help but feel like you're the only one alive. You drive for miles and not see a single soul. Just the headlights cutting through the darkness and the sound of the engine humming beneath you. Peaceful, safe, I thought. That night, though, things didn't feel right. The first thing I noticed was the way the air smelled. There was a dryness to it, but not the usual dry heat you get this time of year. It was different, like dust mixed with something heavier, something that clung to the back of my throat, but I didn't think much of it. You get used to weird things out here. The wind has a way of carrying smells you don't expect. Cattle from the far side of the ridge, the occasional skunk, even the scent of rain when it's been dry for weeks. But this was something else. As I kept driving, I saw it, out of the corner of my eye at first. A flicker of movement. I blinked and looked again, thinking it was just a shadow. But no, there was definitely something there, standing just off the road. For a split second, I thought it was a person, maybe someone walking, maybe stranded out here in the middle of nowhere. So I slowed the truck down and rolled the window down a crack, just enough to call out, "Hey, you need some help?" There was no answer. No movement, nothing. I wasn't a stranger to seeing people walking the road around here, though not often, since this stretch of highway doesn't have much going on except the occasional car passing through. But people do walk out here sometimes, especially late at night when it's too hot to drive and too late to get a ride. But what struck me was how still this figure was. It wasn't walking, and it wasn't just standing there. It was almost like it was waiting, and the longer I looked at it, the less it made sense. I stopped the truck and put it in park, my fingers cold on the gear shift. My heart was starting to pick up its pace, and that feeling, that uncomfortable feeling you get when something's wrong, started to settle in the pit of my stomach. Something wasn't right about this, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I told myself I was just tired. I told myself I was imagining things. I even convinced myself that it was just a trick of the shadows. I'd driven this road so many times that it felt like second nature. But tonight felt different. So I did what any curious, half-crazy man would do. I got out of the truck. I didn't know why I did it, honestly. Maybe it was the heat. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was just that nagging feeling that I needed to figure out what the hell was going on. The figure wasn't far from the truck, maybe 30 feet at most. I walked toward it, my boots crunching against the gravel, my heart hammering in my chest. The closer I got, the more I could see it. The thing that struck me immediately was that it wasn't really a person at all. It was more like a shape, a form but not a human one. It was tall, unnaturally so, and the way it stood didn't look right. It was wrong. The figure seemed to absorb the light around it. The more I tried to make out its shape, the more it slipped from my grasp, like it was made of smoke or shadow, but darker than anything I'd ever seen. It was taller than a man, but not in a natural way. It looked elongated, stretched, almost like it wasn't supposed to be standing in our world. My skin went cold. I stopped walking, and I don't know why, but I knew I couldn't get any closer. And still that thing didn't move. Not a single twitch. It just stood there, as still as death itself. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Hey, are you all right?" My voice sounded too loud in the silence, but still nothing. No response. I could feel the air thickening, pressing in around me. It was like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for something. The only sound was the beating of my own heart. And then, just as I was about to turn back and get in the truck, I saw it move, not in a way that made sense. It didn't step toward me, but it didn't stay still either. It just shifted. The air felt colder and the ground beneath me seemed to shift. It didn't feel like I was standing on solid earth anymore. It felt like I was somewhere else, somewhere wrong. And the figure? It watched me. There was no face, no eyes, but I felt it. It was looking at me. That's when the panic hit me. My whole body went stiff. My feet felt like they were glued to the ground. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Without thinking, I turned around and ran back to the truck. My heart was racing, my breath coming in sharp gasps, but I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I slammed the truck into gear and sped down the road, the sound of the engine roaring in my ears. I didn't stop until I reached the house. I don't even remember driving home, to be honest. It's all a blur. I sat in the truck for what felt like hours, just staring at the headlights as they flickered in the distance. The world felt off. It felt like I wasn't in control of it anymore. I'd seen something that didn't belong. And when I finally got out of the truck, I didn't even go inside. I stood on the porch for a long time, staring at the empty road, waiting for something to show itself again. But it didn't. And when the sun came up the next morning, I was still shaken. I've driven that road 1,000 times since that night, but never after dark. The thing is, every time I pass that stretch, I feel it again. The cold, the stillness, the pressure in the air. It's like it's still out there waiting, watching. I don't talk about it. Nobody would believe me. They'd think I was crazy. But I know what I saw. I can't forget it. Every time I close my eyes, I can still see it. That thing standing in the road waiting for me to stop. I haven't gone down that road at night since, and I don't plan on it. Something is out there, and I don't want to find out what it is. My name is Eli Porter, and I'm from Lubbock, Texas. I was 27 at the time, a grad student who'd just wrapped up a tough week of research. This was back in the summer, the kind of summer that sits heavy in the air and stretches long after the sun sets. I was headed out to Palo Duro Canyon for some peace and quiet, needed to clear my head. At that age, when you're drowning in books and deadlines, a few hours away from it all feels like a long-lost treasure. So I loaded up my old car with snacks, a thermos of coffee, and set the GPS for the canyon. I remember the road, it's straight, nothing but dust and open sky. You can feel the weight of the land stretching out for miles, no fences, no houses. But you know, it's peaceful. The kind of quiet that's comforting at first, but after a while, it starts to feel like it's pressing in on you. That night, I'd been driving for almost 2 hours when the GPS started rerouting me. I didn't think much of it at first. Sometimes these things happen, right? It wasn't until the road started narrowing, the gravel turning to dirt, that I began to pay closer attention. My headlights cut through the thickening darkness, but there wasn't a soul in sight. No cars, no signs of life. Just me, alone with the night, the road, and the occasional chirp of a lone cricket. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't this. The road got worse, twisting and winding. A few times I almost turned back, but something kept pushing me forward. I'd been there before, years ago, when I was younger. Maybe I thought that if I kept going, I'd get to that same spot and find some peace. Then it hit me. There was something off about the fences. At first I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, but I looked closer. The fences were broken. Not just a post here and there, but entire stretches where the wire hung limp, sagging. Some sections were just wide open, like someone had deliberately cut through them. I slowed the car down, trying to stay calm, but it was hard. There was something about it, the emptiness of it all, that was starting to feel wrong. There should have been a ranch or a house or something out here, but there was nothing. Just the road, the dust, and the long stretch of emptiness. The longer I drove, the heavier the air seemed to get. I could hear my tires crunching against the dirt. The sound so loud in the silence, it almost felt like the land itself was listening. And then I saw it. Off to the side of the road, barely visible in the dim light, were tire tracks. At first, I thought nothing of it. It wasn't unusual to see tracks on a back road like this, but as I kept driving, I realized something was wrong. The tracks were fresh, but they looked familiar, like they were identical to the tracks my own car had left just moments earlier. I slowed the car down, the hum of the engine louder now in the stillness. I kept looking, hoping I was mistaken, but no. There they were, the same marks, the same depth. I'd been driving straight, so how could this be? I should have kept moving, but I couldn't. I pulled over just to get out and take a better look, but the moment I stepped out of the car, the world around me seemed to freeze. The air, thick with dust and humidity, felt colder now, and the wind wasn't making any noise, like it was holding its breath. I took a few steps away from the car, staring at the tracks, and that's when I saw it. The loop. The tracks didn't just lead out, they circled back around. The same set of tracks looping and crossing over themselves all the way down the road. I don't know how long I stood there staring, but it felt like an eternity. I was out in the middle of nowhere, and the more I looked at those tracks, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was following me. Not just now, but the whole way. The road didn't make sense anymore. It felt like I wasn't supposed to be here, that this place didn't want me to be here. I don't know what made me do it, but I got back in the car. My hands were shaking when I turned the key in the ignition, but the engine started up without a hitch. I pulled away, and for a moment I thought maybe I'd be all right. But the road didn't feel any different. It felt smaller now, like the land was closing in on me. I kept my eyes on the headlights, watching as the tracks I just left behind seemed to stretch further ahead, as though the land itself was rewriting itself, pushing me along. I should have turned back. I know that now, but I didn't. I kept driving, and after what felt like an age, I finally made it back to the paved road. I breathed a sigh of relief, even though I knew it wasn't over. The whole time I was driving, the GPS never stopped rerouting me, like it was trying to push me down paths I hadn't chosen. I don't know what it wanted or if it even cared, but I knew one thing. Something had followed me. The rest of the drive was quiet. The road felt wide again, but it wasn't the same. When I got back into town, I went straight home and locked the door behind me. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The next morning, I tried to talk myself down, convinced it was just my mind playing tricks. But when I went to look at my car, I found something strange. The tires were covered in dust, yes, but there were tracks in the dirt around it. Fresh ones, going in a perfect loop, just like the ones I'd seen out there on that road. I walked out. My car's still somewhere down there, engine running. My name is Tanner Wright, and I'm from Brazos County, Texas. Now I know what you're probably thinking. This town's so small you can blink and miss it. But it's home. Been that way all my life. I retired from the force a few years back, and these days I keep mostly to myself. I live out by the creek, where the dirt roads stretch forever and the nights feel like they've got nothing but time. But there's one night, one memory, that I can't shake. It stays with me like a shadow. And no matter how much I tell myself, it was just a trick of the mind, I know deep down it wasn't. It was real. It was late summer, the air thick and still, the kind of heat that hangs on you and sticks, even when the sun's gone down. I'd grabbed my rod and tackle box, headed out to the little spot I used to fish near the old bridge, just a few miles down the farm road. You know the one, right? The old wooden bridge that's been there for as long as anyone can remember. The planks are worn thin, and the rust stains on the metal beams have been there so long, you don't even notice them anymore. I used to pull over there all the time, just to listen to the water running underneath, watch the moonlight on the creek. Felt like you could hear everything out there, even the things that weren't supposed to be heard. I remember the night being quiet, too quiet now that I think about it. You could hear the crickets, sure, and the rustling of leaves when the wind picked up, but something else was off. The night seemed empty, like it was holding its breath. But I wasn't paying much attention to that. I had my fishing rod, a thermos of coffee, and I was ready to just let the hours slip by like they always did. I set my lantern on the hood of my truck and got to work on my line. The water below me calm, rippling just enough to keep things interesting. The creak of the bridge above me was familiar, like an old friend, but then I started hearing something else, something strange. At first I thought it was just the wind rattling one of the boards up top, but then it came again, sharp, metallic, like a hammer tapping against metal. Now this old bridge has always had its sounds, wood popping, rust settling, but this was different. It wasn't the same kind of creaking that comes with age. It sounded like someone was under there, knocking on the beams with a tool, methodical, rhythmic. I stood there for a moment, just staring at the water. I told myself it was just the night playing tricks. Maybe a piece of metal was shifting under the weight of the creek's current. Maybe it was just an animal, but something in my gut told me it wasn't right. You ever get that feeling? Like someone's watching you even though you can't see them? That's how I felt standing there by that bridge listening to that knocking. It wasn't like anything I'd ever heard before. Not out there, not on that bridge. I should have left. packed up my things and gone home, but for some reason I stayed. I grabbed the lantern and walked closer to the edge of the bridge, the beam of light cutting through the dark like a knife. The knocking stopped. Just stopped. The silence was sudden, like the world had held its breath, waiting for something. I don't know how long I stood there, but it felt like time had stopped. Then, just as I was about to turn around and call it a night, something caught my eye, a glimmer of light from under the bridge. I stepped closer, not sure what I was seeing. At first, I thought it was just the moon reflecting off the water, but it wasn't. It was metal, and it was shining, like something was nailed there, glinting in the lantern's glow. I crouched down, squinting, and that's when I saw it. It was my badge. My old badge. Nailed right into one of the wooden planks like someone had taken a hammer and pinned it there just like that. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at it. 100 things ran through my mind at once, but none of them made sense. I didn't know if I should have been angry or scared, but what I felt most was confused. The kind of confusion you get when you wake up from a dream and can't remember where you are or how you got there. The lantern shook in my hand and I dropped it right into the creek. I could hear the glass shattering, but it didn't matter. I wasn't looking at the lantern anymore. I was looking at that badge, the one I'd worn for years, the one I'd left behind when I retired. It was still mine, still my name etched into it, but it didn't belong there. Not under that bridge, not like that. I knelt down, hands trembling, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I reached for it, but the air felt thick, like something was pushing back against me. I couldn't bring myself to touch it, couldn't bring myself to pull it out. I think I knew even then that once I did, I wouldn't be able to forget it. Something about it felt wrong. It felt like it didn't belong to me anymore. It felt like someone else had put it there, someone who wasn't ready to let go of what I'd left behind. I left it there. I turned around, walked back to my truck without saying a word, without looking back. I haven't been back to that bridge since, and I'm not sure I ever will. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but I don't think so. Sometimes when I drive past that old place, I still see the light on in one of the rooms at the motel nearby, the one that hasn't been used in years. The rest of the motel's falling apart, but that one light stays on. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that badge never really belonged to me. Maybe it was always meant to stay there under that bridge. I don't know. I don't know if I want to. But I do know this. After that night, I wasn't a cop anymore. Not really. Not in the way I thought I was. And that's something I've had to live with ever since. Funny how the quiet ones are the ones that stick with you the longest. My name's Linda Cray and I'm from Burnett, Texas. Now, I've lived a quiet life mostly. Raised my kids, kept my head down, did the best I could to get by. Nothing too exciting about my life. Just a lot of days spent right here, looking out at the same old hills, the same quiet roads. But there's this one thing, this one night that I can't shake. It happened years ago, but I still think about it sometimes. I'm going to tell you about it, though I don't talk about it much and I can't say I know what it means. I don't know if I ever will. But here goes. It was one of those nights, you know, hot and still, even for summer. The kind of Texas night that feels like the air's just thick with waiting. I was driving south down Highway 281, coming back from a visit to my sisters in Marble Falls. I hadn't gotten far, just outside of town really, when my old truck started sputtering. I could feel the engine buck and struggle beneath me. I'd been nursing that truck along for a while, so I wasn't surprised. But I didn't want to risk it, not out there in the middle of nowhere, so I pulled off at the first station I saw. It was one of those old places, the kind you don't see much anymore. A weathered sign that flickered and buzzed, telling me that it was the last gas on 281. I remember thinking that sounded like a good name for a place that's seen better days. The lights were dim like they hadn't been changed in years. I didn't think much of it. I was just tired and I wanted to get back home. I parked by one of the pumps and the click of the engine shutting off was the only sound out there in the stillness. No cars, no trucks, just the distant hum of cicadas. I stepped out, feeling the heat settle on my skin. It was too late to be that hot, but there it was. I went to the pump and started to fill up, and that's when I noticed him. The attendant. He was standing there in the small booth, just watching me. He didn't wave, didn't greet me, just stared. His face was half lit by the overhead light and I couldn't see him too clearly. But something about his stillness gave me a strange feeling. It wasn't right. It wasn't the kind of watchful gaze you get from a worker trying to keep an eye on customers. It was too quiet, too patient, like he wasn't worried at all. I thought maybe he was just some old guy who'd been here too long. But when the pump clicked off, I didn't know what to do. I thought he might come over, say something, but he didn't move. Just stood there staring. So I decided to pay inside, get it over with, and be on my way. I didn't think much of it. When you're traveling alone, sometimes you just push through that weird feeling you get. You don't give it too much thought. I walked up to the door, but it wouldn't open. I tried again, but the door was locked. And that's when I started to get real nervous. I looked back at the booth. The attendant hadn't moved. Still staring, just waiting. I couldn't see his eyes from here, but I could feel them. I turned around and knocked on the glass, thinking maybe I'd just been too quick. Maybe I didn't see the sign that said they were closed, or maybe the lock was broken. But there was no answer. No sign. Nothing. I looked over at the truck, thinking I could just get in and drive off, but something told me I wasn't supposed to leave just yet. I stood there for a moment longer, just staring at that locked door. It was like time was frozen in place. That's when I heard it. The faintest sound, like a key turning in a lock. I turned to look, expecting maybe the man to be coming around, but the station was still silent. The wind had picked up, though, just enough to make the sign flicker again, buzzing like a fly caught in a jar. I tried the door one more time, and this time it opened. I walked inside, almost not even thinking about it. The place was empty. The counter, the floor, the shelves, everything was covered in dust. Old coffee cups sat on the counter, their contents long gone. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator in the back, but it was quiet. Too quiet. I paid for the gas slowly. The old man never moved, never spoke. I handed him the cash and he just nodded. He didn't smile, didn't look at me in any way that felt like a real person. Just a slow nod, like he'd been doing this forever. I left after that, and I didn't think much of it until the next morning. I was telling my sister about it, and she looked at me kind of strange. "Linda, you know that station's been closed for 15 years, right?" I just stared at her. "What do you mean, closed?" "It's been shut down. I heard about it years ago. They had some kind of issue, something about the land or the building. It was condemned or something. No one's worked there in ages, but I swear to you, I paid. I filled up and I walked in like any other gas station. The doors weren't locked when I went inside. The place wasn't closed. I know what I saw. I've passed that station 100 times since, and it's always the same. Empty. No one there. But sometimes when the night's quiet, I could swear I see the light flickering. And every once in a while, when I'm close enough, I think I hear that old door creak open. I don't know what happened that night. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks, but something about that place, it doesn't sit right with me. It's like it was waiting. Like it always was. They say things don't just disappear. I'm starting to think that some things don't go away no matter how much time passes. And I reckon I'll never know if it was just an old station or something else. But I've learned something. Sometimes it's better not to know. My name is Rick Anders, and I'm from Leakey, Texas now. Leakey's a quiet little place tucked away in the hill country, where the roads wind like they've been here forever, and the sound of crickets and cicadas fills the night air. I've worked as a park ranger out here for a while now, and I've seen plenty of things. Some strange, some just a part of life in the wilderness. But there's one thing I can't explain. It's been years, but I still think about it. Especially when the sun's setting and the world starts to cool off, and that's when I see it most clearly in my mind. It started one evening right around dusk, not long after I got off my shift. I was driving down the old county road that runs out past the backside of the park, heading home, when I saw something in the headlights, just standing there in the middle of the road. At first I thought it was just a deer. You know how they get, real still like that, waiting for the cars to pass. I slowed down, but I didn't stop and didn't think much of it. The light hit its eyes, and for just a second I saw how wide they were. They didn't blink. They were fixed on the headlights. That's something I'll never forget, those eyes. Big, dark, still as a stone. I thought it was strange, but I figured it was just one of those things. Maybe it was sick or something. But the next night, when I was driving the same stretch of road, there it was again, standing right where it had been the night before. Same position, same deer. And once again, those eyes. Big, dark, not blinking. I remember feeling a little uneasy, but I didn't think much of it. Could have been the same deer just hanging around, you know? But then the next night it was there again. And the next, and the next. Same place, same deer. And I started noticing more little things. The way it never moved, the way it never even flinched when the headlights hit it. You ever get that feeling that something's just off, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That's what it felt like. It wasn't until about a weekend that I noticed something else. I slowed down that night, watching it, trying to figure out what was going on. I had the truck in gear, ready to go around it, but when I glanced down, I saw something in the dirt. Tire marks. Circling it. It was the strangest thing. A full circle around that deer, like somebody had driven around it in slow motion, maybe for hours. I didn't know what to make of it. I had to shake my head. I told myself it was nothing. I must have imagined it, or maybe someone else had been out there doing something dumb. But every time I drove by after that, those marks were still there. And the deer, standing in the same spot, in the same position, not blinking, not moving. I started getting to where I couldn't drive by without slowing down. It was like I was drawn to it, like I couldn't help myself. There was something about it, something I couldn't explain, but I felt it. I remember one night after I'd gotten off work late, I went out there again, just to see. It was dark and the air smelled like rain, though it hadn't started yet. I was all alone, or at least I thought I was. When I pulled up, there it was, right in the middle of the road, just like always. But this time, I don't know. There was a feeling in the air, something heavy. I turned the truck off, sat there in the silence. No cicadas, no wind, just the hum of the truck's engine cooling down. And there it stood. I don't know how long I sat there, but I could feel my heart pounding, like I wasn't alone anymore. I don't know how to explain it. But I could feel something, like I was being watched, but not by the deer. It was watching me too, but there was something else, something older, something that wasn't quite right. I don't think I've ever been as scared as I was that night. I turned the truck back on and sped off, and I haven't stopped since. I couldn't even tell anyone about it. Who'd believe me? Who'd understand? But I'll tell you this. Sometimes when I'm out in the park at night working late or just walking through the trees, I can still feel it. That thing, whatever it was, still watching. And every time I close my eyes, sometimes just for a second, I see those eyes again. Big dark, not blinking. Never blinking. My name's Howard Ames, and I'm from a little place called Gonzales, Texas, though I don't live there anymore. I've spent most of my life on the road, hauling freight from one town to another. I've seen the sun rise and set on more highways than I care to count. But there's one night, one stretch of road that's always stuck with me. I've tried to forget it, or at least push it to the back of my mind, but every so often it sneaks up on me and I can't shake it. It happened about 8 years ago, back when I was still working the long hauls. It was one of those nights, you know. Just me and the open road, a quiet, peaceful kind of solitude that you only get out on the interstate in the dead of night. The air smelled like rain was coming, but it hadn't quite reached the ground yet. I was westbound on I-10, heading toward El Paso with a load of whatever it was that week, some of it I don't even remember. I had my thermos of coffee beside me and the radio playing low. My rig's engine had started to make this old rough sound, like it was struggling, but I'd learned to ignore it. Old trucks do that. The radio wasn't much better. It would fade in and out, picking up static and snippets of songs that didn't make much sense, but it was enough to keep me awake. I passed a couple of gas stations along the way, their flickering lights casting a dim glow on the highway, but there wasn't much else out there. Just the endless stretch of pavement, the hum of the engine, and the occasional rustle of wind through the mesquite. It wasn't long before I saw it, that exit. It had to be around 3 a.m., just that perfect time when your mind starts to play tricks on you, but your body's too tired to care. I'd driven this stretch of road 100 times, and I knew exactly where I was. I'd even stopped at the rest area once or twice for a break, but that night something felt different. It was like the world had gotten just a little too still. My radio crackled and went quiet for a second, then came back to life with a voice. Soft and steady, but not a voice I recognized. "Howard," it said, like it knew me, like it had been waiting for me. "Don't miss your exit again." I froze. I couldn't tell if it was the radio or if I'd heard it somewhere outside the truck. It wasn't like anything I'd ever heard on the CB before. The way it said my name, so matter-of-fact, made my skin crawl. I checked my mirrors, but the road behind me was empty. Just me and the black night stretching out ahead. The truck engine gave a low rumble, like it was getting ready to stall out. and I had to fight to keep my hand steady on the wheel. I figured I'd imagined it. Just the wind, maybe, or a voice on the radio from one of those truckers who like to mess with people. But as I passed the exit, I heard it again. Same voice, same calm tone. "Howard, don't miss your exit again." I felt a chill go down my spine. I didn't think much of it at first. I told myself it was just some prank, a trucker with too much time on his hands and a CB radio. But as I passed that exit, something else caught my eye. I thought I saw something moving. Just a flash, like a figure standing by the side of the road. I glanced over quickly, but the headlights didn't catch anything. Still, the feeling stuck with me. For the next few miles, the radio stayed quiet, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I glanced at the rearview mirror, it felt like something was lurking just out of sight. The road stretched on, straight and empty, and the engine kept rumbling like it was going to die any minute. Then, just as I was about to pass another old motel, one of those places where the neon sign flickers on and off, I heard it again. That voice. This time it was different. It wasn't just in the radio. It was coming from the cab with me. "Howard," it said, and I swear I could feel the breath on the back of my neck, cold and slow. "Don't miss your exit again." I looked over at the passenger seat, half expecting to see someone sitting there. There was nothing. Just my jacket slung over the seat and the smell of coffee still lingering in the air. My hands were shaking now and I couldn't make sense of it. And then it got worse. The voice now louder, clearer, but still not from the radio. This time it was in my head, as if it was inside me. It wasn't just telling me about the exit anymore. It was telling me what I had in the cab with me. The thermos. "Your coffee's gone cold." I glanced down and sure enough, the coffee was ice cold. I hadn't touched it in hours. I hadn't even remembered when it happened. "Your boots are dusty. You haven't seen a soul for miles." I slammed my hand down on the radio, but the static came back, louder now, crackling and hissing. The voice was still there, soft and steady like it had always been there. "You're not alone, Howard. You never were." That's when I felt it. Something in the air, something behind me. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't a noise and it wasn't a shadow. It was just this presence, this weight, pressing in from the corners of the cab. The road was empty. The highway stretched on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had gotten in with me. I don't know how long I drove after that. I just kept my eyes straight ahead, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The engine finally gave out just before I reached the next town, and I pulled over to the shoulder, shutting the truck off in the dark. The voice stopped. The radio went silent, and for a moment all I could hear was my own breath and the sound of the wind. But that wasn't the end of it. No, I could still feel it there. Still hear it whispering through the static. It never left. I smashed the radio with my fist, but even after that, even after I left the truck and walked into town, I could still hear it. Sometimes when I'm alone, I can hear it again, soft and patient, waiting just out of sight. And every time I drive that stretch of highway, I make sure I don't miss the exit. I make sure to take it, even though I know it won't matter. It never really did. You see, it wasn't just the voice. It wasn't the truck or the road or the exit. It was what was already there. That old feeling like something was watching, something waiting. I can't explain it. But sometimes when I'm sitting alone at night, I hear it, whispering through the static. My name is Pam Gentry, and I'm from a little place called Santo, Texas, just off the highway on the way to Mineral Wells. Not much out there but open fields, the kind of place where you can hear the wind on the road for miles before you even see the car. I was just passing through, as I often do, working my rounds as a traveling nurse. It's a lonely kind of life, but it's a life I know. You get used to the stillness, to the quiet, to long hours driving down old two-lane roads and finding somewhere to lay your head for the night. So when I saw the lights of that old motel up ahead flickering just a little, I was grateful. It wasn't much, nothing more than a faded sign, a dusty lot, and a few old rooms. But it was a place to rest. It had been a long day, the kind where the sun sets and you're still going, just wanting to get off the road. I pulled up to the office, an old building with peeling paint, the kind where you could smell the years on the wood and the metal. I stepped out of my truck, a squeak in the suspension that had become familiar, and walked up to the door. The bell above the frame jingled as I stepped inside, and the heat from outside hit me, mixing with the air inside. A man behind the counter, older, his hands wrinkled but his eyes sharp, looked up at me. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, voice low, slow. I need a room for the night, I said, trying to hide how tired I felt, though I'm sure he could see it in my eyes. He nodded, flipping through a ledger on the counter. The pages sounded stiff under his fingers, like they hadn't been turned much in years. We got a room, sure. You in town for work? Yeah, just passing through, I said, glancing at the clock behind him. It was a little past 8, the light outside fading to dark. You a nurse? He asked it like he already knew, but I guess it was the kind of thing that wasn't hard to guess. Traveling nurses, they come through small towns often enough. He didn't seem to care too much. That's right, I answered. Just need a place to crash for a few hours before I head out again. He smiled like it wasn't the first time he'd heard that. And then something strange happened. He looked at me for a long moment like he was seeing something in me. Something he didn't quite understand. I got you down for a room last week, he said, slow, and I could feel my heart skip. Did you check in already, miss? I blinked. No, I'm just passing through now. I haven't been here before. The man didn't say anything for a second, just flipped through the pages of that old ledger again. He was quiet, his fingers brushing over the paper as though he was looking for something. Well, it says here you checked in last Thursday, he said, pointing to the page with a little more certainty than I'd have liked. I glanced at it. Sure enough, there was a name written there. Pam Gentry, room 12. I stared at the page, my throat tightening. That wasn't possible. I hadn't stayed here before. I would have remembered. I would have remembered the smell of the place, the way the walls looked, the dull hum of the neon sign outside. I hadn't even been near Mineral Wells that week. I'm sorry, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That can't be right. I've never been here before. He shrugged, but his eyes were still on the page. Well, it's right here. Maybe you forgot? I shook my head, the unease crawling up my back. There was no way, but as I stood there, I could feel the weight of the room pressing on me. The air felt thick, like something was just beneath the surface waiting to come through. Well, it's no matter, the man said, his tone suddenly lighter, though it still felt off somehow. We've got a room for you, same one. No trouble at all. He handed me a key. Room 12, you can head on back when you're ready. I took the key, but I didn't feel right. I wasn't sure what was wrong, but something didn't sit well. Maybe it was the way he was looking at me, or the way he said same one with that strange, too calm tone. I nodded and made my way outside, trying to shake off the feeling that had settled deep in my chest. I walked to my truck, but before I could open the door, I glanced up at the motel again. It was quiet, the lights flickering in that almost broken way they sometimes do. But something about the place looked different now. The building seemed older than I remembered, and the shadows stretched longer, like they had more weight than they should. I walked to room 12, the key in my hand, my boots tapping on the pavement. The door creaked when I opened it, just like you'd expect from an old place like this. Inside it was dark, but there was a faint smell of mildew in the air, mixed with the lingering scent of old carpet and stale cleaning products. I turned on the light. It flickered at first, but it came on steady enough. I set my bag on the bed, not feeling much better, but knowing I needed to sleep. I looked around the room, trying to shake off the feeling that something was wrong. The wallpaper was peeling, the furniture old and worn, and the bedspread had a few stains I didn't want to think about. It was the kind of room you get when you're desperate and tired, just looking to rest for a little while. Then I noticed the guest book on the table beside the bed. People sign in when they stay, you know? It's an old habit, but it's still done sometimes. I picked it up thinking maybe I could find someone else's name to distract me from the odd feeling sitting in my chest. But as I flipped through, my eyes stopped on the page dated for last week. The page was fresh, the ink still dark, the paper barely creased. And there it was. My name, written in the guest book. Pam Gentry. It was my handwriting. But I had never signed in here before. I hadn't stayed here. I hadn't even been close to this place last week. I stared at it for a long time, my heart racing. The room felt colder now, like the air had shifted somehow. I wanted to leave. I wanted to walk out the door and drive until I couldn't see this place anymore. But I couldn't move. My eyes were glued to the page. I thought about the clerk, how he had looked at me, how he had known my name even before I said it. How he had told me I'd been here before, checked in last week. It didn't make any sense. None of it made sense. I left the guest book on the table, my hands shaking as I grabbed my things and walked back out to my truck. The air outside was still heavy, the sound of distant thunder low in the sky. I drove for a while that night, my mind spinning, not sure what to believe. But even now, when I pass by that old place, I see the light on in room 12. It's the only one lit. The rest of the motel is dark, abandoned, falling apart. But that one light stays on. And I've never gone back there. I still write my name differently now, just in case. My name is Chris Donahue, and I'm from Plainview, Texas. Now, you might not know much about this little place. Just a quiet town sitting on the edge of the plains. But it's where I grew up. We've got a few good folks around, but not much else. It's the kind of place where, after sundown, the streets empty out and the only sounds you hear are the wind whistling through the mesquite trees, or a dog barking somewhere far off. It's peaceful. At least it's supposed to be. But that peace, well, it don't always last. Not after what I saw. It was a late fall evening, the kind where the air smells like rain but doesn't quite bring it. I'd been out all day, running errands for the school, just the usual stuff. But I decided to take the long way home. I've always liked driving those back roads. There's something calming about them. The way the asphalt rolls out smooth. The way the fields stretch out forever on either side, like they could swallow you whole. It's a peaceful, open kind of feeling. I remember I was about halfway between town and the old cornfield, where the highway turns into a dirt road, when I noticed something strange. There's a small farm out there just past the fields with an old farmhouse and a few sheds. It's been empty for years, though. At least that's what I thought. The place had been up for sale for as long as I could remember, but no one ever bought it. I guess it had that air about it, like something was wrong, even before the roof started caving in. Anyway, I'd never paid it much attention. Just a rundown place you pass by on the way to nowhere. But that night something felt different. The wind had picked up, and the shadows of the cornfield seemed to stretch out longer than usual. As I passed by the farm, I couldn't help but notice the scarecrows out in the field. They hadn't been there the last time I drove through, and for a minute I thought maybe I was mistaken. Maybe I had just missed them, but I knew that wasn't right. They were new, freshly put up, standing in rows like some twisted welcome party, their ragged clothes fluttering with the wind. I didn't think too much of it at first. Maybe it was just someone trying to keep the birds out. But there was something off about the way they were standing, the way they were arranged. Like they were waiting, the way their faces were stitched, rough and uneven, and their limbs stuck out stiff, unnatural. The oddest thing was, as I drove past, one of them seemed to move just a little, the arm shifting slightly like it had been nudged by the wind or something else. I shook my head, figuring it was nothing but my imagination playing tricks. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I tried to focus on the road ahead, but when I passed the farm again on my way back into town, I noticed something strange. The scarecrows weren't in the same positions they'd been earlier. It was subtle, but I could swear that one of them was standing a little closer to the road now, like it had taken a step forward. I'm no fool, and I know how the wind can play tricks on you, but there was something unsettling about it. I told myself it was just the dark playing with my eyes. But I couldn't stop looking, couldn't stop glancing over as I drove past. I was halfway through that stretch of road when I thought I heard something. At first I thought it was just the wind, but then I heard it again. A soft rustling sound like footsteps in the field. That stopped me cold. There was no reason for anyone to be out there, not this time of night. Especially with the fields so barren. And no one had been out there when I passed through the first time. My heart started to beat a little faster and I slowed down, my hands gripping the wheel. I looked in my rearview mirror, but the road behind me was empty. Nothing but the empty fields and the rustling leaves. But then, just as I was about to let out a breath, I saw something. There on the road were footprints, fresh ones leading off from the shoulder, right toward the edge of the field where the scarecrow stood. Now, I didn't know if I was just losing my mind, but there was something about those footprints that didn't sit right with me. They didn't look like they belonged to any animal or even a person in boots. No, these prints were lighter, as if whoever or whatever left them had been walking lightly, almost delicately. They were spaced out like the person wasn't walking normally, like they were pacing or waiting for something. I wasn't sure what to do. Part of me wanted to get out of the truck, follow those tracks, see where they led, but another part of me told me to keep my hands on the wheel and get the hell out of there. I don't scare easy, but something in that moment told me to leave well enough alone. But I didn't. I stayed put for a while, staring out the window, my eyes drawn to those footprints, the way they led off into the dark cornfield. The scarecrows were still standing out there, their hollow faces staring back at me, and I could have sworn one of them had moved again, just a little. I turned the key and got the engine going, the old truck sputtering to life, and I didn't look back. Not once. Not even when I passed the old farm again. The next day I drove back out there just to see if I'd been imagining things. The sun was out and everything looked the same. The field was empty, not a scarecrow in sight. Not even a footprint. It was like nothing had happened at all. Maybe it had just been a bad dream, a trick of the light. But I knew what I'd seen, and I knew the way the wind had felt different that night. The way the shadows had stretched out long, like they were reaching for me. Sometimes when I drive that way again, I still catch a glimpse of that old farm, the cornfield empty as always. But there's a part of me that always wonders. I'll tell myself it was just the wind, just the shadows, but deep down I know it wasn't. I don't know who or what was out there that night, but I know they weren't there when I drove back. And I can't help but wonder if they're still out there, waiting for the next person to drive through. Maybe they'll be waiting for me again, or maybe they'll just stay where they are, but I don't think I'll ever know for sure. Some things are better left alone. My name is Tommy Greer, and I'm from Rankin, Texas. It's a small town, just a dot on the map between Odessa and San Angelo. A place where the wind never seems to stop blowing, and the nights are thick with silence except for the distant hum of a gas pump or the creak of an old truck somewhere down the road. I've worked the oil fields around here for a few years. Mostly pipeline work. It's honest work, dirty, and I ain't ashamed of it. But I've never quite been able to shake something that happened out there on Oil Road 127. I don't talk about it much. Hell, I don't think I've told anyone the full story, not even my old man. You ever hear someone say something that just doesn't sit right with you? Like it's too heavy a truth to carry? That's what it's like to remember that night. That's what it's like to drive past that stretch of road now. It was a late shift, just after midnight, when I got the call. The flare stack had shut down and I was the one they sent out to light it back up. Now I ain't a stranger to those flare stacks. They burn day in and day out. A constant fire that'll singe the air and light up the sky for miles. It's a part of the oil field. One of those things you get used to, like the smell of crude oil in the air or the sound of a diesel engine sputtering to life. But this night something was different. I grabbed my thermos of coffee, made sure the radio was tuned low, and started the truck. My old Chevy sputtered a few times before the engine finally came to life, like it was reluctant to leave the driveway. I've had that truck for years. She ain't much to look at. Rust spots, torn seat covers, the radio dial that only works half the time. But she gets me where I need to go. That night, though, it felt like she was dragging her heels the whole way. Oil Road 127 is one of those empty stretches of highway, the kind where the pavement's cracked and the weeds grow up through the cracks. The road's lined with old equipment, rusted tanks and pipelines that haven't seen any use in decades. When you drive out there at night, it's easy to get lost in the dark. The headlights cut through it like a knife, but it feels like there's a lot more out there than you can see. When I got to the flare stack, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The usual buzz of the pumps and the faint hiss of gas just wasn't there. It was like the place had been holding its breath. I parked the truck, climbed out, and felt that cool, dry air hit me. The smell of oil mixed with something else I couldn't place. Something sharp like burnt metal. The flare was still out and the ground was barren around it, all cracked earth and dirt. I could hear the wind kicking up dust in the distance, but that was about it. The radio in my truck was silent, nothing but static. I walked over to the flare control panel and checked the switches. Everything seemed normal. I didn't think too much of it. Sometimes these things just shut down, you know? Happens every now and then. I flipped the switch to reignite the flame. It didn't catch right away, so I fiddled with it a little longer, trying to get that pilot light going. That's when I noticed it. The first time I felt that cold knot in my stomach. There were boot prints in the dirt. Not just one set, but several, circling the base of the flare. Now, I'm no stranger to seeing tracks in the mud or the sand. Hell, I've worked out here long enough to know a man's tracks from a deer's. And I can tell you right now, those prints weren't made by no man or animal. They were off, too wide, too deep. Like something was walking in the dirt, but not quite in the way a person would. They didn't seem like they'd been there long either. Just enough to leave a mark in the dust like someone had been pacing. I told myself I was just seeing things. It was late and I hadn't had much sleep. Maybe I was just tired. I didn't think too much about it, but I couldn't shake that feeling that something was wrong. The flare kicked on with a roar, and the heat blasted out at me. I squinted into the flame for a second, trying to calm myself. I kept my eyes on the flare, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. That feeling of being watched, you ever had that? Where you know you're not alone, but you can't see a damn soul. I looked around, but the place was empty. Then I heard it, a sound like footsteps on the dirt. Slow, deliberate, like someone walking in circles around me. I froze, heart racing in my chest. I looked down at the ground again, and sure enough, the boot prints were still there, now circling closer to the base of the flare. I didn't know what to make of it, but I knew this much. Those prints weren't there before I got out of the truck. I hadn't heard anyone approach, and I sure as hell hadn't seen anyone walk past me. I don't know how long I stood there watching those prints, hearing that slow, steady step echo in the back of my mind. The wind kicked up and I could feel that dry dust stinging my face, but it didn't ease the feeling. That cold, tight knot that had settled in my stomach. I don't know why I didn't leave right then. Maybe I thought I'd find an answer if I stuck around. But when the truck was finally running and I was back behind the wheel, heading back down that road, I couldn't help but glance back one last time. The flare was still burning bright against the dark sky, but something was off. The air around it was wrong, thick, like it wasn't the same air I'd been breathing earlier. I haven't been back since. Not for work, not for nothing. And every time I drive that stretch of road, I still feel it, like the air's holding something back. And sometimes, in the middle of the night when I'm drifting off to sleep, I smell it, that oil, that sharp metallic scent. It comes in my dreams, in the quiet of the dark, and I wonder if I'm the only one who remembers, or if that thing, whatever it was, is still walking out there in the dirt, circling that old flare, waiting. My name is Cody Nash, and I'm from a little place near Abilene, Texas. It's one of those towns most folks just pass through without a second thought, nothing more than a dot on the map. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody, and the wind's always a little too loud, a little too dry. I've worked as a ranch hand for most of my life, and if there's one thing I know, it's dust. You get used to it after a while. Gets in your clothes, your hair, your skin, but this was different. It was late afternoon, sun hanging low, and the sky had that weird yellowish tint to it, like the world was holding its breath. I was in the truck, headed back after a long day out near the back pasture. My old Chevy's engine coughed and sputtered a bit, but she was reliable enough usually. I had the windows cracked just enough to let in the cool air, the kind that smells of sagebrush and dirt. I was sipping coffee from a thermos I'd packed that morning, listening to the AM radio. The signal was weak, but I didn't mind. The sound of the man talking about the weather, the way his voice crackled, made me feel like I was part of something bigger. The world's always quieter out here, especially in the late summer, when the heat finally starts to let go. It wasn't till I got to the old dirt road, the one that cuts through the flatlands, that I noticed the change. The wind picked up sudden-like, and with it came that heavy smell, the kind of dust that feels like it's not just in the air but in your bones too. I could see it at the edge of the road, the sky starting to churn like a storm was about to break. It wasn't rain. No, it was dust, thick and brown, swirling in the air like the earth itself was about to swallow the world whole. I pulled over and shut off the engine, watched it for a minute. The wind was screaming through the mesquite, but I didn't feel like I had to rush anywhere, not yet. But then the dust got real bad, fast. I mean, it hit like a wall, and just like that, I couldn't see a thing. I've been through 100 dust storms, and this one was different. Usually you can make out shapes, you can feel your way through it. But this time it was so thick it was like I was blind. The air got heavy and I could taste the grit in the back of my throat. I should have stayed put, stayed in the truck, waited it out like I'd done before. But something in me made me step out into that mess. I don't know what it was, maybe the heat or maybe just the pull of the land, but there I was, standing outside, trying to make sense of the world that had disappeared around me. The truck door slammed behind me with a creak, and I could barely hear it over the howl of the wind. I took a few steps, my boots crunching through the dirt, and that's when I saw them. Figures faint and far off, just shadows moving through the dust. At first I thought they might have been some cattle, maybe strays I'd missed earlier, but then I realized something wasn't right. The way they moved wasn't natural. No, these shapes, they didn't have the gait of anything alive. It was like they were gliding, floating just above the ground. I stood there for what felt like forever, trying to make out what I was seeing, but the dust swirled so thick, I could barely see my own hands in front of my face. It was like the air was alive, moving with a mind of its own. The figures didn't seem to care that the storm was raging around them. They just kept coming closer, slow but steady, as if they knew exactly where they were headed. Now, I've been around this land all my life, seen coyotes, seen buzzards, and plenty of things that made you think twice about what you were looking at. But this was different. You ever get the feeling that you're being watched? Not just looked at, but really watched, like someone's been looking at you for a long time, just waiting? That's the feeling I had right then. And it wasn't just me, I don't think. No, the wind changed. It went from howling to something more like a whisper, like it was trying to tell me something. But I couldn't make it out, not through all that dust. I took a step back toward the truck, but then the shapes moved closer. They weren't even walking anymore. They were just there, standing in the dust right in front of me. I could barely see them now, but I could feel them. Like they were close enough to touch, like they'd been standing just out of reach for hours. The way they stood, still and calm, like they'd been waiting for me. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. That's when I knew I wasn't alone out there. I'm not proud of it, but I ran. I don't even remember climbing into the truck. I don't remember turning the key, but the engine started up like it always does, and I slammed the gas, getting the hell out of there before I had a chance to second-guess myself. The dust was still thick, choking the air, but I kept going until the truck was shuddering with the strain and the road was clear again. I didn't look back. You don't look back in a dust storm. You just keep moving. That night I slept with the windows shut tight and the fan blowing on high. I could still feel the weight of the dust in my lungs. And when I woke up, it was still there, the taste of it, like a dry mouth that never goes away. Now, I pass that same stretch of road every so often and I don't stop. I don't even look at it. Sometimes when the wind picks up and the sky starts to turn that funny yellow, I get this feeling that I'm not alone. That something's out there, just out of sight. Maybe it's the dust, maybe it's the land. Hell, maybe it's both. But one thing's for sure, the dust never left my throat. Not all the way. It sits there heavy, like a memory I can't shake, and I reckon I never will. My name is Lyle Briggs, and I'm from Marshall, Texas. I've been a surveyor for just about as long as I can remember, working all across this stretch of East Texas. Mostly, I handle landlines, running measurements, marking plots, making sure everything's where it's supposed to be. I spend a lot of time out on the road, just me, my truck, and the vast quiet of this place. Some folks say it's lonely work, but I find it peaceful. Gives me time to think, time to breathe. You get used to the rhythm of the land, the feel of the dust under your boots and the wind in your face. But sometimes it feels like the land's got a rhythm all its own, a kind of heartbeat that isn't so easy to follow. It was late in the summer when it happened. Real late, past midnight, and I'd been working all day on the stretch of Highway 59 between Nacogdoches and the Louisiana border. If you've ever driven down that way, you'll know it's not much to look at. Just long stretches of blacktop, miles of pines, and those old creeks running along the side of the road. The kind of place where the world feels like it's paused for a minute, holding its breath. It's quiet, especially at night. The only sounds are the hum of your tires on the pavement and the occasional distant bark from a dog. I'd been out there all evening, doing measurements for a new development they were planning, not too far off the highway. It wasn't a hard job, nothing out of the ordinary. But by the time I finished, the night had started to stretch on, and I was getting that slow, tired feeling in my bones. The kind you get when the sun's been gone for hours, and all you've got left is the low light from your truck's headlights cutting through the dark. I hadn't planned on being out there so late, but as I drove along that old highway, I was just glad to be heading back to the motel in Nacogdoches. There's an old place off the highway just past the gas station. I always stay there when I'm out working. Not much to it, just a small, worn-down building with a flickering neon sign that says vacancy, though it's usually only half lit. The door creaks when you push it open, and the floors squeak like they're holding secrets, but it's quiet. I like that. I wasn't in any hurry to get back, though. The world felt slow, like the heat of the day had soaked into the pavement and wouldn't let go. As I drove past mile marker 120, I noticed something strange, just a flicker of light out of the corner of my eye. A reflection, maybe. At first, I didn't think much of it. There are trees on both sides of the road, and sometimes, if the headlights hit them right, you get that weird shimmer. But then I saw it again. The reflection wasn't off the trees, it was coming from the mile marker. I know this stretch of road like the back of my hand. The mile markers always start at 120 and count down from there as you head south. But this one read 13. I don't know why, but that number stopped me. I pulled over, turned off the engine, and sat there for a minute staring at it. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out why it said 13 instead of 119 like it should have. It didn't make any sense. I knew the highway well enough to know they hadn't moved or changed anything. That mile marker had always been 120, and it wasn't like someone had come out there and switched it up. I figured it was a mistake, maybe just a sign gone askew or something. So I got back in the truck, started the engine, and drove on. But the further I went, the stranger it got. I passed mile marker 118, then 116, but when I hit 114, I noticed the same thing. It read 13. I remember feeling my heart skip a beat in my chest. I looked back at the road behind me. Nothing had changed. The highway was still the same, quiet as ever. But those numbers, those mile markers, they didn't make sense. I pulled over again, my hands shaking just a bit as I grabbed the flashlight. Sure enough, the same thing. 13. Like it was mocking me. I started thinking it was some kind of prank. Maybe some kids had been out there messing with things. But no, that wasn't it. You see, if you've spent as much time on the road as I have, you start to notice things like that. A prank doesn't make sense in a place like this. It doesn't fit. I sat there for a long time staring at that number, listening to the soft hum of the truck and the rustle of the wind through the trees. There was nothing else, no cars passing by, no signs of life. Just me and the road. I told myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks on me, tired from working so long. But when I drove past the next marker, it was the same. 13, I started to feel it then, the way the road seemed to stretch out in front of me longer than it should have, how the headlights barely seemed to reach the end of it. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't moving forward at all. I stopped again, got out of the truck, and walked back to that mile marker. I don't know why I did it, but I needed to see it up close, maybe try to make sense of what was happening. But when I reached it, there was nothing. The number was gone. Just an empty post, bare and worn down from years of weather. I stood there for a long while, feeling a chill settle into my bones. It's funny how the mind works, because I didn't want to believe what I was feeling. But I knew. That road, it wasn't moving forward. It wasn't letting me leave. Every time I checked those mile markers, it was the same thing. I'd go back and they'd all say 13. Not one would move. The road itself seemed to twist around in ways it shouldn't have. I spent hours out there just driving and stopping, trying to make sense of it. But no matter what I did, it didn't change. 13 was the only number that ever showed. After a while, I couldn't even tell how far I'd gone. It was like the miles just slipped away, like they never really existed. And the road, it kept stretching on, going nowhere. I finally gave up. The next morning, I drove straight back to town, found my way to the motel and parked outside. The parking lot was empty. I had a coffee from the gas station down the road, and I tried to forget about it. Tried to forget about that road, but I'm telling you this now because it's been years and I still drive that stretch of highway every so often. Every time I pass those mile markers, I can't help but check. It's the same as it was. 13, just like it was that night. The road. There's something about it. Something it does to you. Like it eats up time and space, like it doesn't let you go. And every time I pass it, I swear, the miles just seem to slip away like they're not really there at all. That highway eats distance in ways I don't understand. My name is Heather Lowe and I'm from Clarendon, Texas. If you've never been, it's a quiet place just off the main highway with a few old buildings and not much else. There's a little diner that's been there since the 50s, a gas station that hasn't seen much traffic in years, and some ranches out past the fields. It's one of those towns where people don't lock their doors and the sound of wind through the mesquite is the loudest thing you hear most days. I never thought I'd leave, and I guess I never really did. I've spent my whole life there, but it wasn't until I started working as a journalist that things started to feel different. Like maybe there were parts of this place I didn't know, parts I wasn't supposed to know. I'd been working on a podcast for a while, you see. It was about the quiet stories of the rural Texas landscape, the ones you don't hear much about anymore. Things like forgotten towns, old ghost stories, and strange occurrences people never talk about, like a secret they carry too long. I spent a lot of time out on the back roads, driving to places no one had visited in years, recording sounds of the wind, the quiet, the empty roads. The idea was to capture the subtle things, the forgotten things, and maybe tell a story or two along the way. One night, about a year ago, I was heading out towards Amarillo. It was a cool evening in late September, the kind where the air smells like rain but doesn't quite deliver. I had my truck packed with my gear, microphones, recorder, an old thermos of coffee, and I was driving along Route 287. The sun was low, casting a golden light over the fields that stretched for miles in every direction. It was beautiful, the way the land just seemed to go on forever. It made you feel small, you know? That evening, I planned to stay at an old motel outside Amarillo. It's been around for decades, but not many people stop there anymore. It's quiet. The kind of place where the light from the neon sign flickers on and off, and the screen door always makes a little creak when it opens. They've got a room in the back where the owner lets me park my truck by the door, so I can unload my equipment without worrying about it. It's one of those places where the floorboards pop under your feet, and the smell of dust and mildew always lingers in the air. Anyway, after checking in, I set up my gear, placed the microphones around the room, and started recording. The goal was to get the ambient noise, the creaks and groans of the old building, the faint hum of the fridge, the soft buzz of the overhead light. But it was quieter than usual that night, almost too quiet. The wind wasn't picking up like it normally does. It felt like the whole town was holding its breath. I thought maybe I could catch something in the silence, something that would feel real in a way that would make people understand what it's like to be alone in a place like that. So I let the recorder run, sitting there in the dim light, sipping my coffee, staring out the window at the empty parking lot. The air smelled of dust, and I could hear the faint rustling of the mesquite out back. After about an hour, I stopped the recording and went over to check the playback. The sound was there, just like I expected. The creaks, the distant hum of a truck engine from the highway, the soft whirring of the motel fridge. But then, after a while, I heard something else. At first, it was just a faint sound like a soft breath in the background. I thought maybe it was the air conditioning or maybe just the wind playing tricks, but it wasn't the wind. No, it was slow, deliberate, almost waiting. I froze. I turned the volume up, listened more closely. The breathing wasn't mine. It was a quiet, steady sound coming from somewhere behind me. I turned around, expecting to see someone standing there, just out of view, but there was no one in the room. The door was locked, the windows shut tight. Just me in the empty motel room. My heart started beating a little faster, and I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I had left the door cracked a little too wide when I went to set up my equipment. Maybe the old building was settling in a way that made it sound like breathing. But as I listened, it became clearer, slower, deeper. It was so quiet but unmistakable, a breath that didn't belong. I went to the recorder and checked the settings. It was picking up the ambient noise, but the breath, that soft, steady sound, it wasn't from the microphones. It was coming from somewhere else. I didn't know what to think. For a moment, I stood there, trying to convince myself it was just a technical glitch or maybe the equipment playing tricks on me. But then I realized something. The sound had changed. It wasn't just a breath anymore. It was moving. I could hear it closer now, like it had gotten closer to me, circling around like it was trying to find a way in. I reached over and stopped the recording, my hands shaking as I hit the button. The silence came back heavy and thick. I told myself it was nothing. I deleted the file, erased it from the recorder, and sat back in the chair. I took a long drink from the thermos, my hands still trembling. And I'll admit I didn't sleep that night. I spent the rest of it sitting in the chair by the window, staring at the empty lot. The sound of the wind outside was the only thing that kept me from hearing the breathing again. When I finally left the motel that morning, I didn't even look back. I drove back down the highway to Clarendon without stopping. I haven't been back to that motel, and I haven't touched the recorder since. But I still hear it sometimes, late at night when I put my headphones on to listen to something else. I hear the breathing. It's faint at first, just like it was on the recording, and every time I hear it, I feel like there's something behind me, just out of reach, something waiting. I don't know what it was, but I know it was there, and I'll never be sure if it was something in the room with me that night, or if it's been following me ever since. But sometimes when I listen to the silence now, it's like I can still hear that breath, soft and steady, just waiting to be heard again. My name is Darren Cole, and I'm from a little town just outside of Wichita Falls. Been a roofer most of my life, working out on old buildings, breathing in the dust and sun. You get used to the heat out here, but it still sneaks up on you. especially come summer, you know? The kind of heat that makes the pavement shimmer in front of you. Anyway, it was a long, hot stretch of highway one August afternoon, and I was driving back from a job up in the northern part of the county, tired and dry, when I saw that old church out by the side of the road. It's the kind of place you don't notice unless you're looking for it. A small white clapboard building with peeling paint and a couple of oak trees growing crooked beside it. I reckon it had been there for longer than I had, though I'd never seen anyone come or go from it, not in all the years I'd been driving by. I wasn't looking for anything in particular that day. I was just hot and thirsty. Figured I'd stop for a minute and rest my legs, so I pulled off the road and parked under the shade of one of the oaks. The air had that thick, dry smell of dust and sagebrush, and I could hear the wind rustling through the leaves above me. Felt good to get out of the truck. The sun was still high, but the shadows were starting to grow longer. I stood there for a bit looking at the church. The door was cracked open, like it had been waiting for someone to walk in. I didn't feel much like going inside at first. Something about the place gave off this quiet sort of stillness, like it didn't belong there at all. Like it had just been dropped into the landscape and left to rot. But after a minute or two, I figured it was a good place to stretch my legs. Might be cooler inside with the windows open, so I pushed the door all the way open and stepped inside. There wasn't a sound in there, not even a creak in the wood under my boots. I looked around. It was bare, save for a few pews and a couple of dusty windows that let in the light in soft slats. Nothing fancy. The kind of place folks might go when they've got nothing else left, I reckon. I took a few more steps and noticed a little table near the front. There were a few old Bibles laid out on it, all of them open to the same page, as though someone had set them there with some purpose. I don't know what made me walk over to them, but I did. It wasn't the kind of thing I would have thought much about, but something about it felt wrong, like someone had been there just before me, and I was walking in their footsteps. I picked up the first Bible. The page it was open to was worn, the edges yellowed with age. The verse printed there was one of those old ones, something about the Lord being a shepherd or some such thing. I read it for a moment, but then I set it back down. I don't know why. Just felt like it wasn't meant for me. I picked up the next one, but it was the same verse. I wondered how long they'd been there, all those Bibles open to the same words. Like it was some kind of sign, like they were waiting for someone to read them, to take something from them. But I wasn't the kind of man to go looking for signs. Not like that. I'd seen too many things in my life that didn't make sense to waste my time on things that didn't add up. But then I picked up the last Bible, the one on the far side of the table. It was a little more worn than the others, the leather cover cracked in places. I opened it up and there it was again, the same verse. But something was different this time. There, scrawled in pencil on the inside cover, was a name. My name, Darren Cole. I don't know why I froze like I did, but I did. I must have stared at that name for a minute, maybe longer. I could feel my pulse in my throat like it was pushing its way out of my chest. I thought I was seeing things, but when I looked again, the name was still there. Darren Cole, written in a hand I didn't recognize. I closed the Bible and backed away from the table. I didn't know what to make of it. Maybe it was a joke, someone's idea of a prank, but deep down I knew it wasn't. It didn't feel like a joke. It felt like the kind of thing that might have been waiting for me. I left the church faster than I ever meant to. I remember the door creaking behind me, and the air outside felt different, like it was holding something back. I got back in my truck, started the engine, it took a minute like it always did, and drove off without looking back. I've never been able to forget about that old church. I don't go near churches now, not even the ones in town. I can't shake the feeling that it's waiting for me, that I'm supposed to be there, or maybe I was supposed to be there. I don't know. But I know this. Something about that place, about that Bible, wasn't meant for me. Not the way I thought. Not the way I used to think about the world. And sometimes when I'm driving by late at night, I still see that old church in my rearview mirror. The light in the window's still on, even though the building's been empty for years. I try not to look, but I can't help it. That's the thing about places like that, I guess. They don't let go. My name is Paul Riggins, and I'm from El Dorado, Texas. Now, I know you've probably never heard of it, but that's the way of small towns. You don't get a lot of visitors unless they're lost, and even then, they don't always find their way out. El Dorado's one of those places that looks the same no matter how many years go by. Same dusty road, same old gas station, and same little diner where the coffee's always too hot but you drink it anyway. I'd been retired for a few years by the time this happened, and I wasn't in any hurry. When you get to be my age, you learn to take your time. I was driving down Highway 277 just a little past sunset. My truck's engine sputtered a bit trying to turn over, but it always does that when it's been sitting for a while. I told myself I'd get it fixed, but well, you know how it goes. Anyway, the sun was dipping behind the hills, casting everything in that warm, golden light, and the kind of quiet that only comes in a place like this. I was heading up to a ranch a few miles out just to check on some old friends when my GPS started acting funny. I've got one of those fancy ones, one of those that talks to you like it knows more than you do. But I've never really trusted it. Still, that day it told me to take a detour. Now, I didn't think much of it at first, you know. It's common for those things to reroute you, especially out here where the roads twist and turn like they're trying to hide from the world. But this was different. The GPS kept buzzing at me, telling me to take this little side road, a gravel path that I didn't recognize. I've been down every dirt road in this county at some point in my life, and I don't recall ever seeing this one. But it was getting late, and the thought of driving all the way back to the main road seemed tiresome, so I followed the directions. The gravel crunched under the tires, and I remember thinking how strange it felt, like I was moving slower than usual. I didn't know why, but something about the air had changed. The sky, it wasn't that Texas orange anymore. It had turned a dark purple like a bruise. And the wind? Well, it had that smell of rain on the dirt, but no rain ever came. The kind of quiet I was used to out here had gone, and in its place was this strange stillness, like the world was holding its breath. I didn't think much of it at first, but as I drove, the road started getting thinner and thinner. The kind of road where a man starts thinking maybe he should have turned around, but by then it's too late. I passed a few old barns, nothing special, just weathered wood and fading paint. Then, out of nowhere, I came across a field, a wide, open stretch of land that didn't look like it should have been there. I pulled over to the side, looked out my window, and I could have sworn I saw something moving out there. I can't tell you what exactly. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, or maybe the wind playing games with the tall grass. But there was something or someone out there, and it didn't belong. My heart started to pick up pace, and for the first time in a long while, I felt that old familiar weight of unease pressing down on my chest. I'm not one to scare easy, but I sat there for a moment just staring. Then I glanced at the GPS. It told me to keep going. Recalculating route, it said. The road, though, was coming to an end, or at least that's how it looked. I could see it in the distance. A fence line. And then nothing. Just a dirt field with the dark horizon beyond it. I wasn't sure where the road was supposed to go, but I figured I could turn around and head back. Only when I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw headlights coming up fast. I thought maybe someone else had gotten lost too, but there was no other car. I didn't hear anything. No engine noise, no sign of a truck pulling up behind me, but the lights kept getting closer. My stomach dropped. I thought I had to be imagining it, but the lights weren't stopping and I knew something wasn't right. The closer they got, the stranger it felt. It wasn't like any headlights I'd ever seen before. Too bright, almost like they were blinding me, but I couldn't look away. I took my foot off the brake and slowly pressed the gas. The truck crept forward inch by inch. I wasn't sure if I was trying to outrun whatever was coming, or if I was just hoping to make it out before it caught up with me. I didn't look back. I told myself that it was just a figment of my mind, that I was imagining the whole thing. But when I got to the end of the road, the headlights were gone, like they had vanished into thin air. No noise, no engine. Just the quiet, just the weight of the stillness. The road ended in that field just like it had to, and I didn't know where I was anymore. I turned around and made my way back to the main highway as fast as I could, but it was like the land didn't want to let me go. Every time I tried to look at my GPS, it was frozen, stuck on that same screen showing a road that wasn't there. It felt like the world had just disappeared, like I had driven off the map. And when I made it back to the highway, everything seemed too quiet, too still. No cars, no sounds, just the wind and the endless road stretching out in front of me, and the faint nagging feeling that something had been there, something that never left. When I got home that night, I tried to forget about it. I told myself it was nothing. But every time I pass that old stretch of road, I get that same feeling, like there's no map for where that road went, like it leads somewhere it shouldn't, somewhere you can't explain. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the wind, or maybe it was just the loneliness that gets to you after a long drive. But if you ever find yourself out there somewhere past El Dorado, where the roads don't seem to make sense. Well, you'll understand, because there's something about that place, something that's always been there waiting. And maybe it's just waiting for you. My name's Emma Rayner, and I'm from a little place near Del Rio, Texas. It's not much more than a dot on the map, really, and most folks don't know it unless they've passed through on their way to somewhere else. You won't find any big towns around here. No flashing lights, no busy streets, just long stretches of blacktop, fields that go on forever, and roads that bend like they're trying to hide from the sun. There's a certain quiet about the place, a stillness in the air that sits heavy, like the weight of a secret that nobody's ready to share. And that's how it's always been for me. I've spent the better part of my life here, driving a postal route that runs through these dusty roads, delivering letters and packages to houses that are barely standing. People who don't ask much from the world except to be left alone. I reckon it's not a glamorous job, but it's a job and it's mine. Now, the funny thing about small towns like ours is that the roads become familiar to you after a while. The houses blend together in your memory. The trees start to look the same, and you don't even have to think about the turns anymore. You just know where you're going. There's something comforting about it, like the world's slowing down just for you. The air's dry most of the year, the kind of dry that makes your lips crack and your throat feel like it's lined with dust. But when it rains, it's different. It smells like earth waking up, like something deep down is stretching its limbs, and you hear the thunder rolling in from miles away. A slow rumble that makes you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. It's peaceful in its own way. I've been on the same route for a long time now, almost 20 years. I know every turn, every mailbox, every dog that'll bark when I pull up. I've even gotten used to the occasional creak of my truck's engine when it's struggling to start on a cold morning. The sound of the radio barely coming through the static, the flicker of streetlights in the distance that make it look like the whole town's fading into the darkness. I don't mind it, not really. It's just part of life here. You get used to the quiet, the loneliness, and the slowness. There's a rhythm to it, something steady and sure, and there's comfort in that. But one summer morning, something happened that I still can't quite explain. It wasn't anything big, not like some of the stories folks like to tell. No ghosts or monsters or anything like that, but it was something that I felt deep in my chest and in my bones, something that made me stop and wonder if I hadn't been living in the wrong world all this time. It started like any other day. The sun was already high in the sky, beating down hard on the cracked asphalt as I headed out on my route. The air was thick with heat, that kind of weighty heat that makes everything feel sluggish. I had my coffee beside me, my old thermos that I take with me every morning, and the radio was playing some old country song that I hadn't heard in ages. I remember thinking about how quiet it was that morning. Too quiet, really. There wasn't even the usual sound of the cicadas buzzing in the trees, just the slow hum of the truck's engine and the occasional rustle of the wind as it moved through the dry grass. It was the kind of silence that settles in your bones and makes you uncomfortable, but you don't know why. The route I take isn't long, but it winds through some of the most barren stretches of land you'll find. There's an old gas station about halfway through, the kind where you have to pay inside and nobody ever goes in unless they've run out of gas. There's a creek somewhere off to the left. One of those places you'd never know was there unless you were looking for it. But on that day, as I drove through the open land, something caught my eye. It was a shimmer just at the edge of the road. It looked like heat rising from the blacktop. That kind of shimmer you see on the hottest days when the sun's beating down. But it wasn't just the road. This shimmer, it moved. It wasn't like the usual haze you get from the heat. This thing, whatever it was, drifted across the road, slow but deliberate, like it had a purpose. I thought maybe it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, the way the heat distorts things. But then it moved again, a little farther out from the edge of the road, like it was coming closer. I told myself it was nothing, just the heat, just the way the world distorts itself when you've been on the road too long. But as I got closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just the heat. There was something about it that felt wrong. It wasn't just a shimmer of air or light. No, it was something else. Something older. Something that didn't belong on that stretch of road. Something that didn't belong anywhere. I slowed the truck just enough to get a better look. I wasn't sure what I thought I was seeing, but I couldn't help myself. It was like my body was telling me to stop, even though I didn't want to. As I got closer, I saw it more clearly. It wasn't just a heat shimmer anymore. It looked like a person, but not a person. It was the strangest thing, almost like a figure walking across the road, but it wasn't walking the way a person would. It moved in a way that didn't make sense. bending and stretching in the wrong directions. The air around it seemed to warp, like it wasn't really part of the world at all. I couldn't stop staring at it, even though something in my gut told me to drive on, to turn the wheel and get the hell out of there. But I didn't. I kept looking. The figure, if that's what it was, wasn't getting any closer, but it wasn't getting farther away either. It just stood there in the middle of the road like it was waiting for something. For me, maybe. I don't know how long I stared at it. Time didn't make sense in that moment. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight I thought my knuckles would split open. My heart was racing, but my body was frozen. I could feel the sweat running down the back of my neck, the heat pressing in on me from all sides. The radio crackled in the background, the voice on the other end sounding tinny and far away, like I wasn't even on the same planet anymore. Then something strange happened. My reflection, the one in the windshield, started to change. At first I didn't notice it, but then I did. My face. It wasn't the face I knew. It was me, sure, but it was older. Much older. The wrinkles on my skin were deeper, the bags under my eyes darker.
The eyes themselves.
They didn't look like my eyes. They were duller, lifeless, almost like they were staring back at me from some place I couldn't reach. I don't know how to explain it, but in that moment it wasn't just my reflection. It felt like the face staring back at me was someone I used to know, someone I had forgotten, someone who didn't belong to me anymore. I don't know what I thought I was seeing. Maybe I thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe it was the heat. But whatever it was, it didn't feel like something that could be explained. The figure on the road, the reflection in the glass, it all felt too real, too close. And I knew in that moment that whatever was out there, whatever that shimmer was, whatever that figure was, it had been waiting for me. It was waiting, and I had driven right into it. I don't remember much after that. I know I pressed the gas down harder, faster than I should have, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get away from it, from the feeling that something was following me, something ancient and patient, something that had been here long before I was. I didn't look back. I don't think I even dared to glance in the rearview mirror. I just kept driving. I haven't driven since that day. Not on that route. Not anywhere near it. It's been years now, but the memory's still with me. Like a shadow I can't shake. Sometimes when I'm sitting at home, I can still feel that weight, that pressure in the air. Like something's waiting just outside. And every time I hear the wind blowing through the mesquite, I remember that shimmer on the road, the way it moved, the way it waited. And every time I know I couldn't go back, not if I tried. That road's still out there. You could drive it if you wanted, but I wouldn't recommend it. Not unless you've got a mind for things that aren't meant to be understood. But as for me, I can't go back. Not ever. My name's Lenny Callahan, and I'm from a little place called Mineral Wells, Texas. It's not much, just one of those small towns you pass through on your way to somewhere else, if you even notice it at all. It's quiet here. Always has been. I reckon there's not much to do but work and wait for the next day to roll around. The streets are old, the buildings weathered, and the air always smells like dust no matter how much rain we get. People around here, they keep to themselves. Not that we're unfriendly, mind you. But folks have their lives to live and they don't need a lot of noise. I've been driving the same route for the mail delivery service for years now. It's a peaceful life. One where you don't expect anything exciting to happen, let alone anything that would leave you wondering if you really want to get out of bed in the morning. It was the fall of '92 when I first noticed it. That year, the drought had been hanging over the land for months and the earth was cracked, dry and as still as a ghost. It had been one of those late afternoons, that time of day when the sun's so low it feels like it's trying to crawl into the horizon. The shadows stretched long across the road, and you could almost feel the heat rising from the ground even though the sun was starting to dip. I was on my usual route, the one that loops past the edge of town where the houses get spaced out a little more and the fields seem to stretch forever. There's a place just past the old diner, where the road forks, one way leading to the river and the other up towards the hill country. That's where I was when it first caught my eye. You know how sometimes when you're driving on an empty road, the heat makes the asphalt look like it's shimmering, like the road's just a mirage in the distance? Well, that's what I thought I was seeing at first, just the usual heat wave. But when I squinted against the sun, I realized this wasn't quite like the usual shimmer. This one had a shape to it. It looked almost like a person standing off the side of the road, but the way the figure moved, well, it didn't move like a person. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It was the kind of day that could make you see things if you weren't careful, so I told myself to just keep driving. But as I got closer, the figure didn't disappear like it should have. It was still there, standing right where the road curves just beyond the fence line. I hit the brakes without thinking. I don't know why I did it, some gut feeling I guess, but I slowed down and pulled over just enough to get a better look. I remember feeling that thick silence in the air, the kind that settles around you like a blanket, heavy and still. The figure was strange. At first glance it seemed like a man, tall and wearing something dark, almost like a coat, though it wasn't cold out. But when I looked again, I noticed something that didn't make sense. The man's legs didn't quite touch the ground, and the way he stood there with his head tilted down just didn't look natural. I tried to shake it off, figured maybe it was just someone working out in the field. But it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. The figure didn't move when I stopped. It just stood there in the middle of the field, its head still lowered. There wasn't a sound, not a rustle in the grass, not even a bird flying overhead. Just the weight of that silence, like the world had forgotten how to make noise. I tried to pull forward, but the truck's engine sputtered like it didn't want to start. It was as if the air had thickened around me, pressing in on the truck, making everything feel sluggish, like I was trying to move through molasses. I don't know how long I sat there staring at that figure. It felt like time was stretching, bending. I knew I should have just driven off, turned the wheel and never looked back. But instead I sat there, the truck barely idling, and watched. That's when something else happened. The figure shifted just slightly, as if it was aware I was there. And then for just a moment I thought I saw its face. Or at least I thought I saw something like a face. But it wasn't right. The features weren't clear, just dark patches in the shape of eyes and a mouth, like they were blurred or smeared into the air itself. That's when the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't know what I was looking at anymore. My breath started coming in quick, shallow gasps, and the truck, that old beat-up thing that had always started without fail, wouldn't move. It felt like the world was holding its breath. And then, without warning, the engine roared to life like something had finally snapped and broken the spell. I stomped on the gas, not even caring if I was in gear or not, and the truck lurched forward. My heart was pounding, and I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror. I could feel my eyes glued to the road, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I don't even remember passing the fork in the road, just that I kept going faster and faster, my head spinning with a dozen thoughts that didn't quite make sense. I don't know how far I drove before I finally slowed down. I guess I just needed to get far enough away. I pulled into a gas station, my hands shaking so bad I could barely get the truck parked. The place was empty, the lights flickering like they were about to go out, and the air smelled like old oil and dust. I sat there for a long time, staring at the truck's hood, trying to make sense of what had happened. But the truth is, I never could. I still don't know what I saw. I couldn't even tell you if it was real, if it was some kind of trick my mind played on me, or if something else had been there waiting. But it wasn't the last time I saw it. Over the next few days, I tried to convince myself it was just the heat, just my imagination getting the better of me, a trick of the sun or the tiredness of too many miles on the road. But I couldn't forget it. I couldn't forget that face or whatever it was that I saw staring back at me. It wasn't until I passed that same stretch of road again that I realized something else. The fields were gone. Not completely, but the ground looked different, like it had been worked over, moved around, shifted. And there, right where I'd seen the figure, was a patch of land that seemed newer, fresher, almost like something had dug into it, something that hadn't been there before. I never stopped there again. I couldn't. Every time I drove past, I felt the weight of it on my chest, that feeling like something was waiting for me. But the more I avoided it, the more the feeling stuck with me. I don't know what it was, what I saw out there that day, but I can't shake it. Sometimes when I'm driving late at night and the road is empty, I'll glance over at the fields, and for just a second, I think I see something out of the corner of my eye, something that doesn't belong, something that's been waiting there longer than I've been alive. I haven't been back down that stretch of road since, and I don't plan on it. There's a part of me that wonders if maybe, just maybe, it was always there, just waiting for the right time to make itself known. I'm not sure if I'll ever understand it, but I know this. Whatever it was, it's still out there somewhere. And maybe it's waiting for someone else, but I won't be the one to find out. I haven't driven that route in years, and I don't think I ever will. My name's Jacob Jake Henson, and I'm from a little town called Winters, Texas now. Winters ain't much more than a crossroads, with a couple of old gas stations and a main street so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Some folks say it's a sleepy town, but it's more than that. It's a place where time moves slower, where people know each other by their first names, and where the land feels like it's been here forever. I've lived here all my life, spent most of my days working on the farm or driving that old pickup down the long, dusty roads that seem to go on forever. Some people might find it lonely, but I never did. There's something comforting about the silence here. Something that makes you feel like you're part of the earth, like you're always in the right place. You'd understand if you'd spent as much time on these back roads as I have. I've been the mailman for nearly 30 years now. Every day I drive the same stretch of road, back and forth from Winters to the ranches and the small houses scattered out on the edges of the county. I know these roads like the back of my hand. Every bump, every turn, every hill that comes up out of nowhere. It's nothing special, just a way to pass the time. But there's one stretch just outside of town that I always remember a little differently than the others. It was late September, right before the harvest was supposed to start. The air had a cool edge to it, but the heat of the summer hadn't quite let go yet. I was driving down that stretch of road, the one that goes past the old cotton field, when I first saw it. It was a quiet morning, just like any other, and I had the window cracked to let the wind in. The radio was playing some old Willie Nelson song, fading in and out as I cruised down the highway. The sun was rising, that soft golden light coming up over the horizon, casting long shadows on the road, the kind of morning that feels like it could last forever. But then I saw something in the distance off to the left, near the edge of the field. At first I thought it was just a trick of the light, something to do with the way the sun was hitting the dry earth. You know how the air can look like it's moving when the heat rises from the ground? But as I got closer, it didn't go away. In fact, it seemed to be getting clearer, and the more I looked at it, the more I realized it wasn't just a shimmer or a heat wave. It was something different, something out of place. It wasn't a person, at least not exactly. It looked like a figure, a tall shadow standing out in the middle of the field, right where the cotton plants had been harvested the year before, but it wasn't solid. The closer I got, the more I could tell it was like a haze, a blur in the air. I thought maybe it was a mirage, the kind of thing you see when the heat's too much and you start to lose track of what's real. But there was something about it that felt wrong. It didn't fit. It didn't belong out there, not in that field. I slowed the truck down without even thinking, the engine rumbling as I pulled off to the side of the road. The dirt under my tires was soft, a little too soft, like it hadn't been packed down in years. The air around me felt still, heavier than it should have been for such a quiet morning. Everything went quiet. Even the birds, which usually make a racket at that time of day, were silent. I remember thinking that was strange, but I didn't pay it much mind. I was too focused on the figure. I don't know why I didn't drive away then. Something made me stay. It wasn't fear, not at first. It was curiosity, I guess. I thought maybe someone had wandered out into the field and got caught in the heat. Maybe they needed help. So I got out of the truck, the door creaking louder than usual in the silence. I stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure was still there, like it was waiting for me. I couldn't make out any details, but it had the shape of a person. A person who was standing too still, too quiet, in a place where no one should have been. As I walked closer, I felt the temperature drop. It wasn't a sudden change, but enough that it made me shiver, even though the sun was still hot. I could see the figure more clearly now, or at least what I thought was the figure. It wasn't right. The shape was blurry, like a smudge in the air, and I could almost make out a face, but it kept shifting, like the air was playing tricks on me. The longer I looked at it, the less it felt like it was actually standing there. It felt farther away, like it wasn't really part of the world. I don't know why, but I kept walking toward it. My legs felt heavy, like they were dragging in the dirt. I could feel my heart beating faster, not out of fear, but out of something else. Something deep inside me that told me to turn around, to get back in the truck and drive away before I saw whatever this thing was. But I didn't listen. When I was about 10 feet from it, everything changed. The air around the figure shimmered, and for a split second I thought I saw something else. Another figure, or maybe the same one, but clearer now. The face, if you could even call it that, was not human. It wasn't anything I could describe, but I'll tell you, it wasn't right. It was wrong in the most awful way. The eyes. They didn't blink, they didn't move, but I felt them watching me, like they were looking right through me. I didn't understand what I was seeing, but I knew deep down, deep in my gut, that this wasn't just some trick of the light. This was something that had been here a lot longer than I had. I couldn't breathe. My legs locked up and I stood there, unable to move, unable to look away. My mind was screaming at me to run, to turn around and get in the truck, but I couldn't. I just stood there, caught in its gaze, in that strange, shifting face. The longer I stood there, the more it felt like the land around me was pressing in, like it was closing off. Then, just as quickly as it had started, the figure seemed to fade. Not disappear, but fade, like it was never really there to begin with. The heat came rushing back, the sound of the birds returned, and everything felt normal. Too normal. Too much like it had been a dream, but the feeling in my chest, the one that told me something wasn't right, that stuck with me. I ran back to the truck. I didn't look back. I didn't even think. I just slammed the door and started the engine, my hands shaking so bad I could barely grip the wheel. I drove straight back into town, faster than I should have, not caring about the speed or the road. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I haven't gone back to that stretch of road since. Every time I drive near it, I feel that cold in my chest again. That same weight in the air that makes me want to turn around and drive the other way. It's been years now and I still can't explain it. I can't say what I saw, but I know it wasn't a mirage. It wasn't a trick. And every time I pass that stretch of road, I wonder if I'll ever know the truth of what was waiting out there, in the cotton fields, just beyond the horizon. I don't go out that way anymore. And I won't, I can't. My name's Clyde Montgomery and I'm from a little town called Mount Pleasant, Texas. Not too many people know it unless they've driven through on their way to somewhere else, and that's just the way we like it. It's the kind of place where you know everyone's name, but not much happens. Quiet, peaceful. The kind of town where life takes its time. The streets are narrow, lined with trees that have been here longer than anyone can remember, and the houses stand close together like they're trying to keep each other company. The biggest event in town is the annual carnival, and even that's nothing to get excited about. We're used to the stillness. It's the kind of stillness that makes you feel like you're wrapped in a blanket of time, where nothing ever changes, and that's how I liked it. I've been a truck driver for most of my life. I haul freight for a living, and I've spent more time on the road than I care to admit. It's a lonely job, but it's mine, and I've grown used to the hum of the engine and the road stretching out before me. I've made the same route for years, Mount Pleasant to Tyler, then down south to Longview and back again. It's the same road, day after day, with the same trucks on the highway, the same rest stops, and the same small towns. It's a rhythm you get used to. You don't have to think about it. You just drive. But one night in the summer of '98, something happened that I still can't quite explain. I was making the trip from Longview back home, driving through the same stretch of highway that cuts through the woods outside of Jefferson. It was late, probably around 2 a.m., the kind of quiet hour when everything feels heavy, like the world is holding its breath. The headlights of my truck cut through the darkness, illuminating just a few feet of the road ahead. The radio was playing softly, the sound of an old country song drifting in and out with the static. The air was warm, still, with the smell of pine and something else I couldn't place. I remember that moment that night like it was yesterday. There was something in the air, something about the way the trees seemed to lean in closer as I drove. I'd driven this route 100 times before, but this time something felt different. The road, which is usually empty at that hour, seemed strangely quiet. No other trucks, no cars, not even a deer crossing the road like they sometimes do. Just me and the headlights pushing through the dark. I don't know why, but I had the strangest feeling that I wasn't alone on that road, like something was watching me, waiting. I shook it off, told myself I was just tired, too many miles under my belt. But then I saw it. Up ahead, just beyond the tree line, there was a flicker of light. At first, I thought it was just another passing car, the headlights reflecting off a sign or something. But when I got closer, I realized the light wasn't moving. It wasn't like any car headlights I'd seen before. It was soft, almost like the light of a lantern, but it was glowing in a way that didn't make sense for that time of night, the kind of glow that shouldn't be there. I slowed the truck, not sure why. Maybe I thought someone had broken down on the side of the road, or maybe I just wanted to see what that light was. But as I got closer, the light didn't move, and I saw something else. It was a figure standing in the middle of the road. At first, I thought it was just some guy walking down the highway, but that didn't make sense. Who would be out here at 2 a.m., standing in the middle of the road with a lantern? I pressed on the brake a little harder. My headlights washed over the figure, but it didn't move. It was tall, much taller than any person should have been. Its body was dressed in what looked like tattered clothes, but the odd thing was it didn't seem real. Not in the way you'd expect. The figure was blurry, like it was made of smoke or mist, and the light, it was coming from it, not a lantern. The glow was part of it, like it was radiating from the figure itself. I remember the hairs on the back of my neck standing up, and for the first time in a long time I felt truly scared. I don't know why, but I couldn't look away. I kept staring at the figure as my truck rolled slowly toward it, the engine idling too loud in the silence. The figure didn't move. It didn't even seem to breathe. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I couldn't make myself stop looking. Then, just as I was about to pass it, something changed. I don't know how to explain it, but the air seemed to get colder. The light from the figure flickered like it was about to go out, but it didn't. Instead, the figure's face shifted, or at least I thought it did. It wasn't clear at first, but then I saw it. The face was blurred too, like it wasn't supposed to be seen. I don't know what it looked like. Maybe it didn't have a face at all. All I know is that I felt like I was staring into something I wasn't supposed to see. Something that had no right being in this world. The truck's engine sputtered, the headlights flickered, and just as I was about to slam on the gas and get the hell out of there, the figure stepped forward into the light, blocking my way. My heart stopped. I didn't know what to do. It didn't move like a person anymore. It just glided, like it was floating on air. And I knew, deep down, that I couldn't go around it. I couldn't go anywhere. But then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure faded. The light vanished and the air snapped back to normal. The figure, the glow, the cold, it was all gone like it had never been there. The road was empty again. My headlights shone on nothing but asphalt and trees. I remember sitting there for what felt like hours, my foot still on the brake, my hands clenched on the wheel. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it, but I couldn't. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe it was minutes. Maybe it was longer. But when I finally drove away, my truck's engine started up again, no problem. Everything was back to normal. Except it wasn't. I haven't driven that stretch of road since. I don't know why, but I can't bring myself to go back out there. Every time I drive by, I think I see something out of the corner of my eye, but I look again, and it's gone. I've tried to talk myself out of it. I've told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe I was too tired, or maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. But deep down, I know what I saw. I don't talk about it much because I don't think anyone would believe me. But I don't need anyone to. I know what I saw, and that's enough for me. I haven't driven down that road since, and I don't think I ever will. My name's Willard Will Hodge, and I'm from a little town called San Saba, Texas. You've probably never heard of it. Not much here. Just a dusty main street with a few old buildings, some country stores, and the kind of quiet that feels permanent, like it's been sitting here since before anyone can remember. The town's tucked into the heart of Texas hill country, surrounded by oak trees, dry hills, and creeks that only run when it rains real hard. Life here's simple. We don't get too many strangers, and most folks around here are content to live their lives without much change. That's how I've lived too. I've worked as a mechanic for most of my life, fixing up old cars and trucks, always with a thermos of coffee beside me and the steady hum of the shop to keep me company. Not much excitement in the day-to-day. But there's one night that I'll never forget, and even now, just thinking about it makes my hands shake. I don't know what happened that night, and I don't know if I ever will, but it still haunts me. It was late fall, just before Halloween. The air was crisp, but there was still that warmth in the breeze that Texas holds on to longer than most places. The sun had long set, and the stars were out in full force, so bright they almost seemed too close to the earth. I'd been working, late at the shop that evening, finishing up some repairs on a truck that had been left with me for days. By the time I finished, it was already dark, with the kind of quiet that comes late at night, where you can hear the distant chirp of crickets, but not much else. My old truck, a beat-up Ford with more miles than I care to admit, was parked out front, and I was getting ready to head home. The road I take home is just a 2-lane highway that cuts through the countryside, winding around creeks and rolling hills. It's nothing special, just a long stretch of pavement that takes me from the edge of town to my place about 10 miles out. I've driven it 100 times. You get used to the rhythm of the road, the way the headlights hit the curves, the way the road dips and rises under the tires. I had the radio on low, some country station playing a song I didn't recognize, and the sound of the engine purring beneath me as I made my way home. The air smelled like wet earth from the last rain, and there was something familiar about the night, like I could close my eyes and know exactly where I was. But then, something changed. About halfway home, just past that old cedar grove where the trees lean in so close to the road, I saw it. At first I thought it was just a trick of the headlights, something I'd seen before but never really paid attention to. There was a light in the distance far down the road, and it was moving. I thought maybe it was a car, but there was something strange about it. The way it moved didn't make sense. It wasn't like any headlights I'd ever seen. It was flickering, almost like a lantern swinging back and forth. And the closer I got, the more I realized something was off. The light wasn't coming from a car or from any person. It was coming from something else. Now I've seen my share of odd things in the night, animals on the road, shadows playing tricks, but this was different. The light wasn't right. It was too high up, almost floating, and it wasn't casting any shadows. I slowed down instinctively, my grip tightening on the wheel. As I got closer, I could see that the light was coming from a figure standing in the middle of the road. It wasn't walking, but it was there, standing perfectly still in the dark, right where the road curves before it dips down into a little hollow. At first I thought maybe it was someone stranded. Maybe they'd broken down, or maybe they were lost, but this was no ordinary person. As I got closer, the figure didn't move. And that light, it didn't flicker like a lantern should. It was constant, steady, like it was part of the person. But there was no detail to the figure. I couldn't make out any features, no outline of a face, nothing that looked like a human. It was just a shape, a dark silhouette, with this strange, glowing light coming from it. My heart started to race in a way that I couldn't control. I rolled my window down just a crack and called out, "Hey, you need help?" I waited, but there was no answer. No movement either. I should have kept driving. I should have just kept going. But I couldn't bring myself to turn away. I felt like I needed to know what it was. So I stopped the truck just a few feet away from the figure, and I sat there, staring. I don't know why I didn't turn on the high beams, but I didn't. I don't know why I didn't hit the gas and drive off right then, but I didn't. I just sat there staring at the figure, trying to make sense of it. The air felt thick all of a sudden, heavy. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me, like the land itself was holding its breath. The figure didn't move, didn't respond, but I swear I could feel it watching me. I don't know how to explain it, but I could feel its eyes, if it had eyes, on me. The kind of feeling you get when someone's behind you, even though you can't see them. That's what it felt like. Only worse. Like it had been watching me long before I ever saw it. I don't know how much time passed. It could have been seconds. It could have been longer. I just know that the longer I sat there, the more uncomfortable I became, the more that feeling of being watched grew, and then out of nowhere the light blinked off. Just like that. In an instant it was gone. The figure, the light, everything was gone. Like it had never been there in the first place. I could still feel the weight of the air around me though, like something was still there, still lingering. I didn't wait another second. I slammed the truck into gear and floored it. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't even slow down until I was back in town. And when I pulled into my driveway, I just sat there in the truck, not sure what to do, not sure what I'd just seen. I still don't know. The next morning, I drove that same stretch of road again, and there was nothing there. Nothing out of the ordinary, no sign of anything unusual. But I'll tell you, every time I drive that way, I feel it. That same weight in the air, that same feeling like I'm being watched. I haven't stopped there since. I haven't even slowed down when I get to that curve. I don't know what I saw that night, and I don't think I ever will. But I know this. Something was there. Something that didn't belong. And every time I drive down that road, I wonder if it's still out there waiting for someone else to find it. I haven't told anyone about what happened. Who'd believe me? But I know what I saw, and I know I can't ever forget it. I don't drive that road at night anymore, and I don't plan to, not ever again. name's James Jim Daniels, and I'm from a small town called Crosby. Texas, it's not much, just a handful of houses, a couple of gas stations, and the kind of dirt roads you can't forget once you've been down them. People around here know each other, even if they don't always talk much. The air smells like cedar most days, and the skies stretch out so wide that it almost feels like the world's too big for you to understand. I grew up here, and I've lived here most of my life, working the fields, fixing old tractors, and mostly keeping to myself. I've always liked it that way. Quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where you never expect anything strange to happen, especially not after dark. But there's one night, one I'll never forget, that changed all that for me. It was the fall of 2003. I was working late, like I often did on a farm just outside of town. The harvest had been slow that year, so I was catching up on some maintenance, checking the fences and making sure everything was ready for the cooler months ahead. The sun had set by the time I wrapped up, and the evening air had started to cool. I hopped into my old Ford truck, ready to head back home. The road back to town wasn't far, maybe a 10-minute drive if you didn't mind the bumps and dust. I wasn't in any hurry. It had been a long day, but there was something calming about the drive after a hard day's work. The radio barely came through, just some static and the soft hum of the engine. It was just me, the truck, and the darkened road ahead, but then something felt off. Not right. It started with a low, distant sound that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't a car. It wasn't anything I could recognize. It was like a hum, a low vibration that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I told myself it was just the wind or maybe a truck coming from the other direction, but when I looked ahead, the road was still empty. No headlights, no dust rising, just that eerie hum. I kept driving, but it felt like the road was getting longer, like I was driving in circles or something. The trees along the side of the road seemed to crowd in a little closer, their branches stretching out like arms, their shadows reaching across the pavement. The world felt smaller, tighter. I glanced at my dashboard. Everything was fine. The headlights worked. The engine was running smooth. But that hum? It grew louder, and the air around me seemed to get colder too, even though it was a warm night. I remember trying to ignore it. I told myself I was tired, that maybe I was just imagining things. But then just up ahead I saw it. At first I thought it was just a trick of the light, maybe a patch of fog or some sort of mist. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't fog. It was a figure, a person, standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes without thinking, the truck screeching to a halt. The figure didn't move. It was just standing there, right in the middle of the road, its shape barely visible in the dim light. I could see that it was tall, but that was about all I could make out. It wasn't like any person I'd ever seen. The air around it seemed to shimmer, like the figure was out of place, like it was made of something that didn't belong in this world. I sat there, staring at it, my heart thudding in my chest. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to get out of the truck. I didn't want to go near it, but I couldn't drive past it either. Something in me told me to keep still, to wait. Then it moved. It didn't step forward. It didn't walk. It just shifted, like it wasn't walking but floating, drifting toward me. I don't know how to explain it. The air around it flickered like the heat waves you see on a hot summer day, but there was no heat. Just cold and that strange hum in the air. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was watch as it got closer. When it was about 10 feet from my truck, the hum grew louder, and I swear for just a moment I saw its face. I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't like a normal face. It was blurry, like it couldn't settle on one shape, but it was staring right at me. Its eyes, they weren't eyes like ours. They were darker, deeper, like there was nothing behind them. And its mouth, if it even had one, was barely a shadow. It was like the figure was made of darkness itself, and everything I saw was just a trick of the light. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move. I was paralyzed, frozen in place, staring at this thing as it drifted closer, and then just as suddenly as it had come, it stopped. It hovered there in front of the truck, its face. Watching, I felt it. I felt it inside me, like it wasn't just looking at me, but looking through me. And in that moment, I knew something. I knew it wasn't alive. It wasn't human. It was something else. Something ancient. Something that had been here long before we ever built this town. Something that had been waiting. The hum grew louder, and then just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure disappeared. The air snapped back to normal and the coldness lifted. I was still sitting in the truck, my hands on the wheel, my heart racing. The road was empty. The figure was gone. The only sound was the idling engine and the soft rustle of the trees. I don't remember how I started driving again, but I did. I don't remember the rest of the way home. My mind was a blur, my heart still pounding in my chest. All I could think about was what I'd seen, what I hadn't seen, and why it had been there, why it had shown itself to me. The next morning I drove that stretch of road again, even though I didn't want to. I needed to see if there was anything that would explain what happened. I wanted to convince myself that it had been a trick of the mind, the kind of thing that happens when you're too tired or too scared. But there was nothing, no sign of anything unusual. The road was the same, the trees the same, the world just as it always was. I haven't driven that road at night since. I can't bring myself to. Every time I go past that stretch, I feel it, an unease, a weight, like something's just beyond my sight waiting for me to turn around. I don't know what that thing was or why it showed itself to me, but I know it's still out there somewhere in the dark. I'm not saying I believe in ghosts or spirits or any of that. But I do know this. Something was out there that night. And whatever it wasn't meant to be seen. I haven't talked about it much, but I'll never forget what happened. I don't know if I ever will. I don't drive that road at night anymore, and I don't plan to. My name's Earl Buck Davidson, and I'm from a small town called Dickens, Texas. It's the kind of place that if you blink while you're driving, you'll miss it. We don't have a lot to offer here. No big businesses, no flashy signs, just a few old buildings, a single gas station, and fields that stretch out forever in every direction. Most folks here don't mind the quiet. We're used to it. I've spent my whole life on this land, working the same fields my father worked, my grandfather before him. There's a rhythm to life out here, a peaceful, predictable rhythm. The kind of life where you get up with the sun, work hard, and when the day ends, you sit on the porch, sip a glass of sweet tea, and watch the stars come out. You don't think much about anything strange because there's nothing strange in a town like Dickens. Or at least that's what I thought until one night. Something happened that I couldn't explain. Something that changed the way I see this place. It was late October, about 2013. The air had just started to cool, but the heat of the day still hung in the air like a memory. I was coming home from a neighbor's place after helping him patch a fence. It was dark by the time I left, and I figured I'd be home just in time to catch the tail end of the evening. It wasn't a long drive, just a few miles from his place to mine, but the road I take, the one that runs through the open fields and the mesquite trees, feels longer at night. The kind of road where when you drive down it you feel like the world's smaller, like the sky is closer to the ground. It's a peaceful road, the kind that doesn't ever seem to change, or at least I thought it didn't. I had my windows down, the cool night air slipping through, and the faint hum of the engine was all I could hear. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular, just the quiet. But then, just as I passed the old creek bed that runs alongside the road, I noticed something. There was a figure standing by the trees, just barely visible in the shadows. I didn't think much of it at first. I assumed it was just someone walking along the road, maybe a hitchhiker or a local who'd been out for a late walk. But the longer I looked, the stranger it seemed. The figure didn't move. It didn't look like a person at all. Not the way people do when they're walking. It stood too still, too unnatural. And the way it was positioned by the trees, too close to the shadows, too far from the light of the moon, it just felt wrong. I slowed the truck, my grip tightening on the wheel, and as I got closer, I noticed something else. The figure didn't have any details. No face, no outline of clothes, nothing I could make out clearly. Just a shadow standing there in the dark. I should have driven past. I should have just kept going, but instead, I stopped the truck, my foot frozen on the brake. For a moment, all I could do was stare at it. My heart started racing, but I couldn't look away. Then for just a split second, the figure moved. Not in the way you or I would move, no shifting of feet, no turning of the head. It just shifted, like it was a part of the shadows stretching out from where it had been. It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen. It wasn't like a person, and it wasn't like an animal. It was like something that shouldn't exist, something that had no place in the world. I don't know why, but I got out of the truck. I walked toward it slowly, my boots crunching in the gravel. My legs felt heavy, like they were moving through thick air, and every step I took felt like it was pulling me closer to something I didn't want to find. I don't know what I expected, maybe that it was just some trick of the light or the heat. But the closer I got, the more it felt wrong. The shadows around the figure seemed to stretch and twist, pulling at the air. It wasn't like the rest of the night, like the normal darkness you get at the end of a long day. This was something else. When I was about 10 feet from it, I stopped. I couldn't move any closer. It was like an invisible force was holding me back, like I wasn't meant to get any closer to whatever that thing was. I stared at it, my breath coming in quick gasps, and for a moment I could swear that the thing was staring back at me. But there were no eyes, no face, just the dark, shifting shape of it. It was then that I heard something. A low, almost imperceptible hum, like the sound of air moving through a crack in the wall. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the sound of anything natural. It was something else. I couldn't place it, but I knew it wasn't right. I should have turned around. I should have run back to the truck, driven as fast as I could back to town. But I didn't. I stood there frozen, staring at it. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished. It didn't fade away like a ghost. It didn't disappear into the shadows. It just wasn't there anymore. I don't know what happened next. One moment it was standing there, and the next it was just gone, like it had never been there at all. I couldn't move for a second. I couldn't even think straight. It was like I'd stepped out of the world I knew and into something else, something that didn't make sense. My mind raced to explain it, but nothing I thought of fit. I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't dreaming. I saw it. Finally, I snapped out of it. I turned on my heel and ran back to the truck. I didn't look back. I don't think I even remembered to put the truck in gear. I just floored the gas pedal and drove as fast as I could, not caring about the road, not caring about anything except getting away. I didn't stop until I was home, until the headlights of my truck shone on my front porch, and even then I didn't get out of the truck. I sat there, hands still gripping the wheel, my heart still pounding in my chest. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually I forced myself to get out and go inside. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept looking out the window, half expecting to see that thing standing by the trees again. But I never did. The next morning, I drove down that road again, hoping that maybe it had just been some trick of the light. Maybe I'd imagined it. But when I reached the spot where it had been, nothing was there. The road was empty. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, but the place where that thing had stood was just empty. I've driven that road a dozen times since, but I haven't driven it at night. Not since that night. Every time I pass that spot, I feel the weight of what I saw, like it's still there, waiting for me. And I know one thing, whatever it wasn't human. It wasn't anything from this world. I don't talk about it. People would think I'm crazy, and maybe I am. But I know what I saw, and I'll never forget it. I don't drive that road at night anymore, and I don't think I ever will. My name's Travis Cooper, and I'm from a little town called Paint Rock, Texas. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody's business, but not in a gossiping way. Just in a we've all been here for generations way. The sun rises over the land here, and it feels like the earth itself is waking up with it. Life moves slow, steady. We work hard, we live simple. Nothing too complicated about it. You wake up, you do your work, and when the evening rolls around, you can sit out on your porch, sip your iced tea, and listen to the sounds of the wind rustling through the mesquite trees. The stars come out, and if you're lucky, you'll hear the coyotes in the distance calling to each other. There's a kind of quiet in Paint Rock that settles into your bones. One you start to take for granted when you live here. I did, at least. But something happened to me one night. One strange, unsettling night that made me question everything I thought I knew about this place, about the land and about myself. I'm not a young man anymore. At least I don't feel like it some days. I've spent more of my life out here than I care to admit. Raising cattle, fixing fences, tending to the crops when we had them. I've never needed much. Just a roof over my head, food on the table, and a few miles of road to get from one place to another. It's always been quiet, too quiet some might say, but I've never been bothered by it. In fact, I've come to appreciate the stillness. The way the world feels a little bit more peaceful when it's just you and the land. That evening started just like any other. It was a warm evening in late August, the kind of night where the air hangs heavy but the sun's already set, so it's not quite as oppressive. The sky was that deep shade of blue, almost purple, that only happens in Texas after a long day of heat. The crickets were already starting to sing, and the stars had begun to poke through the darkening sky. I'd been working in the field all day, getting the irrigation lines fixed, something I hadn't been able to do in weeks. The drought had made it hard to keep up with everything, but that evening there was finally a cool breeze. I decided I'd take a break, hop in my old Chevy and run into town to pick up a few things from the store. Nothing big, just some parts for the tractor and a couple of groceries I'd forgotten to buy earlier in the week. Now I've driven that road 100 times, maybe more. It's a simple 2-lane highway that runs from Paint Rock into town, winding its way through wide open fields and patches of mesquite. The road cuts through the brush, bending and twisting like the land itself didn't want to be tamed. I've never minded it though. There's something calming about driving it, especially in the evening when the air's still warm and you can smell the earth. It's the kind of drive where you can clear your head, think about your day, about life. Maybe that's why when it started to feel off, I didn't notice it first. The truck was running fine, purring like an old cat the way it always does. The radio was tuned to a station that's usually a little fuzzy, but tonight it was clearer than usual. I kept the windows down just a crack, letting the cool air slip through. The road was empty, just as it always is around that time. I passed the familiar landmarks, the old cedar tree that's been there longer than I can remember, the patch of land where I once tried to plant corn, but the drought killed it all. Everything looked just as it always had, but still there was something wrong. It was subtle at first. I remember noticing it in the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement. At first I thought it was an animal, maybe a coyote or a deer, but I didn't see anything when I looked directly at the spot. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there. The truck kept moving along and I told myself it was just the wind. But it wasn't. It wasn't the wind at all. I reached a part of the road where the trees thicken and the sky starts to close in a little. It's a sharp curve, one that drops into a small hollow before it rises back up toward the creek. I've driven it 1,000 times, but tonight it felt different. I don't know why I didn't think to stop, but for some reason I didn't. Maybe I just thought it was the fatigue setting in, or maybe I thought I was just imagining things. But as I rounded that curve, I saw it. A figure. It was standing just off the road, partially obscured by the brush, but there was no mistaking it. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a person either. It was too tall, too thin, and it stood absolutely still like it was waiting for something. Waiting for me, maybe. Now at this point, I've seen my fair share of odd things out in these parts. Coyotes that look like they've been starved for days. Owls that seem to stare right through you. The kind of things you just shrug off and chalk up to the wilderness. But this was different. This wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before. I slowed the truck, though I'm not sure why. Maybe I thought it was someone who needed help. Maybe I thought it was a figment of my tired mind. But when I stopped, I couldn't look away. I didn't want to look away, but I couldn't stop. The figure didn't move. Its form was dark, almost blending into the shadows of the trees around it. I couldn't make out its features. Its face was too blurred, almost as if it was being erased by the night itself. But I knew something was wrong. I could feel it in my gut deep down. This thing wasn't supposed to be here. It wasn't supposed to be anywhere. I rolled down the window just a little, though my fingers were cold and my hands were slick with sweat. "You lost?" I asked. The words came out rough, but I wasn't sure what else to say. The figure didn't respond, didn't even shift. It just stood there, its head tilted downward like it was looking at the ground. That's when the first chill hit me. I wasn't sure what caused it at first, maybe the wind picking up or maybe something else. But the air around me felt colder, heavier, and the silence, it was absolute. I could hear nothing but the sound of my breathing, the faint hum of the truck's engine, and that feeling. That feeling like the world had gone still, like it was waiting for something to happen. I sat there for what felt like forever, not moving, not knowing what to do. My truck was idling, but it felt like I wasn't even moving. It felt like I was stuck in place, like I had driven into some sort of waiting room and now I was trapped. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The figure was moving, no, gliding. It didn't walk like a person. It didn't shuffle or stride. It simply drifted toward the road. Its movement so fluid, so unnatural, it didn't seem real. The closer it got, the more I felt that strange weight in my chest. It was like I couldn't breathe, like the air itself was thickening. I snapped myself out of the trance and put my foot on the gas. But the truck didn't move. The engine sputtered like it was struggling to keep going, like it didn't want to leave. I hit the gas harder, My eyes locked on the road ahead, but the truck just crawled, inching forward. The figure was almost at the edge of the road now, standing there, close enough that I could almost reach out and touch it if I dared. But I didn't. I couldn't. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the truck jerked forward and I sped past the figure. I don't know if it was still standing there or not, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. The rest of the drive was a blur. I don't remember how I made it to the store. I don't remember what I bought, if anything. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the bag. I didn't even check out. I just left, got back in the truck, and drove home as fast as I could. But the thing was, I knew deep down that it wasn't over. I don't go that way anymore. I don't drive that stretch of road at night, and I don't care to. I don't know what that figure was or why it appeared when it did, but I know this. It wasn't human. And I never want to see it again. I don't care if it was just a trick of the light or if it was something else entirely. I can't forget the feeling. I won't. I still live in Paint Rock. Still work my land, still take the same roads during the day. But there's a part of me that knows something's out there. Watching. Waiting. I don't know what it is. But I'm not going to be the one to find out. Not again. My name's Joe Tucker, and I'm from a little town called Poth, Texas. You've probably never heard of it. It's not much. A few hundred people, a couple of gas stations, a tiny post office, and the kind of place where the streetlights flicker more than they shine. It's the kind of place where you can drive for miles and not see a soul. Just the wind pushing through dry fields and the occasional hawk circling high above. Nothing exciting ever happens in Poth, and most of us are perfectly content with that. My life's been like that for as long as I can remember. Quiet, simple, and unremarkable. I've always been one to keep to myself, working on my truck or doing odd jobs for the neighbors. That's how I like it. Or at least that's how I used to like it. It was the summer of 2010 when everything changed for me, and it all started with a drive down a stretch of road I thought I knew better than the back of my hand. I was 28 at the time, still living in the old house I grew up in, the one just outside of town. Nothing much had changed in Poth, not in years. There was no need to, really. You get used to the stillness, the kind of quiet that wraps around you like a blanket and makes you forget what it feels like to hear another voice besides your own. On that day, I was on my way home from town. I'd been running errands, picking up a few things from the hardware store and grabbing a cold drink from the gas station. It wasn't anything special, just a regular trip, the kind of drive I've made 100 times. You leave the main road, turn onto County Road 231 and head straight home. It's a good stretch of road, mostly dirt, a little gravel here and there, but nothing out of the ordinary. It's the kind of road where if you keep your eyes on the horizon, you'll see the sun set slowly behind the flat land, painting everything orange and gold. But this time, something was different. I don't know what it was at first. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe the heat was getting to me, or maybe I was just too used to the silence. But as I drove down that road, I started to feel something strange. It was subtle at first, a feeling, really. A weight in the air, like the land itself was pressing down on me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing, just my imagination running wild. I've driven this road countless times, after all. There's nothing here. Nothing but the dirt and the wind. But then I saw it. Just up ahead near the old barn that's been abandoned for as long as I can remember, there was a figure standing in the road. Now, this wasn't unusual. We have animals around here, and sometimes people walk along the road to get to their properties. But this figure, it didn't move like anything I'd ever seen. It was standing completely still, facing toward me, not a sound coming from it. At first, I thought it was just a person. Maybe someone walking home from the farm nearby, but when I got closer, I knew it wasn't. The air around it seemed to shimmer, like it wasn't quite real. I hit the brakes instinctively. My tires screeched against the gravel, and I brought the truck to a stop just a few feet away from the figure. It didn't budge. I remember my heart started pounding in my chest. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. The figure didn't move at all, just stood there, motionless in the middle of the road. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the ground. But this figure, whatever it was, seemed to absorb the light around it. I stared at it for a few moments, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was tall, taller than any man I'd ever seen, and its body was thin, unnaturally so, like the air itself had stretched it out. It didn't have any discernible features, no face, just a dark shape, shifting slightly as if it were made of smoke or shadows. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I thought I might pass out right there in the truck. I couldn't look away. It felt like I shouldn't look away. I finally forced myself to speak. "Hey," I called out, my voice shaking. "You lost or something?" There was no response. No movement. Nothing. I should have turned the truck around right then and there. I should have backed up and gone the other way, but I didn't. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe I thought it was just a trick of the light. Maybe I thought I was being paranoid. But instead of turning away, I did the stupidest thing possible. I got out of the truck. I can't tell you why I did it. I should have known better. But my feet were already moving before my brain could catch up. I walked toward the figure slowly, my boots crunching on the gravel. The air felt different as I got closer, colder, and the figure, it hadn't moved. It just stood there waiting. I was close now, close enough to reach out and touch it, but something stopped me. I don't know if it was fear or something else, but I stopped just short of it. The figure didn't do anything. It didn't speak. But I could feel it in my bones. It was watching me. And then just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure began to fade. Not like a person walking away, but like it was being erased from the world, slowly dissolving into the air. The shadows that had gathered around it melted back into the evening light, and it was gone just like that. I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at the spot where it had been. My heart was racing, my breath coming in sharp gasps. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually I turned around and went back to the truck. I don't remember getting in or starting the engine. But the next thing I knew, I was driving, speeding away from that place, not looking back. I made it home, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. Something that had been watching, waiting. I haven't been down that road at night since. Every time I drive past that old barn now, I feel it. The weight of that silence, that oppressive stillness that I can't explain. Every now and then, I'll see something out of the corner of my eye. Just a flash of movement, just enough to make my stomach drop. But when I look, there's nothing there. I don't know what I saw that night or what it meant. I don't know if it was a trick of the mind or something else, but I can't forget it. It's like a shadow that follows me, even in the daytime. I don't talk about it. People would think I'm crazy, and I'm not sure I'd blame them. But every time I drive past that spot, I wonder if it's still out there waiting for someone else. I don't know if I'll ever understand it, or if I want to. I just know one thing. I'll never stop on that stretch of road again, not as long as I live. Some things, once you see them, you can't unsee. And whatever it was that night, it's still out there, waiting. I don't go out there anymore. I haven't since, and I never will. My name's Clay Simmons, and I'm from a little town called Granger, Texas. You won't find it on many maps, and you sure won't find many folks passing through. We're tucked away off the main highways, far enough from the city to keep our quiet, but close enough that a few folks from out of town come through now and then. Granger is one of those places where everyone knows everyone else and life moves slow. Real slow. You spend your days working the land, tending to the fields, and sitting out on your porch when the sun sets, just listening to the sounds of the night. Coyotes howling, the wind rustling through the oak trees, the occasional dog barking. It's peaceful. It's the way things were meant to be. Now I've lived here my whole life. Born and raised. My grandfather settled in Granger back in the early 1900s, and we've been working the same stretch of land ever since. I've got a few memories of the old days when the town was a little more bustling, but for the most part it's been quiet. My days are spent working the farm, fixing things around the house, and helping out the neighbors when they need it. It's simple, but like I said, things changed. The summer of 2014 is when it happened. It started out like any other summer, dry and hot, with the sun beating down from early in the morning to late at night. The kind of summer where the dust sticks to your boots and the air feels thick with heat. I'd been working the farm for weeks trying to get everything ready for harvest, when I realized that I needed some new parts for the tractor. So I decided to make a trip into town. I figured it would be a quick trip, just a few miles to the store and back. I didn't expect anything to happen. The drive into town was uneventful as usual. The old Ford rattled along the dirt road, tires kicking up dust behind me. The fields on either side of the road were brown, dried out from the heat. There weren't any animals around. The land seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for rain that never came. As I drove, the sun was hanging low in the sky, casting long shadows over the land. It was around that time of day when everything feels a little too still. I pulled into the little store, just down the main road in the middle of town, grabbed the parts I needed, and chatted with Old Man Harris for a few minutes. Nothing special, just the usual talk about the weather and the crops. After a while, I loaded up the parts into the truck and started back home. That's when I noticed it. It wasn't anything big at first, just a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. I looked to my left, but there was nothing there. Just the same stretch of empty road, the same dry fields. I shook my head, telling myself it was just the heat playing tricks on me or maybe my tired eyes. But the feeling didn't go away. It felt like something was watching me. I kept driving, my hands gripping the wheel a little tighter, and the feeling grew stronger. It was like the air itself was growing heavier. I rolled down the window, hoping the breeze would clear my head. But it didn't. The wind only seemed to make everything feel more oppressive, like it was carrying something with it. Something that didn't belong. When I reached the point on the road where the trees start to thicken, just past the old barn where the fence needs fixing, I saw it again. This time it was clearer. A figure standing just off the road out in the dry brush. It was tall, too tall, and it didn't look like a person. The way it stood there, rigid, motionless, it didn't seem natural. My stomach dropped and I instinctively slowed the truck down, though I didn't want to. I should have driven right past it, but I couldn't. Something was drawing me in, like I was being pulled toward it. The figure didn't move. It didn't speak. But it felt like it was looking at me, like it could see into me. I'm not one to get rattled easily, but something in the air was off. I felt it in my chest, that cold, sinking feeling. I thought maybe it was a trick of the light or some kind of illusion caused by the heat. But the closer I got, the more real it became. I couldn't make out its features. It wasn't just a shadow, but it wasn't quite solid either. The shape seemed to shift slightly, like it was made of mist or smoke, but it was still there, unmoving in the middle of the brush. I had to stop. I don't know why, but I did. My foot hovered over the brake, my heart pounding in my chest, and I just couldn't look away. It wasn't until I was almost right next to it that I realized what it was. Or rather, what it wasn't. There was no face, no eyes, no mouth, just a featureless mass of shadow. I could feel my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't a person. It wasn't anything I recognized, and that's when it happened. The figure, which had been standing perfectly still, moved. But it didn't move like a human. It didn't take steps. It simply glided forward, inching closer as though the ground didn't matter. It didn't walk. It just shifted like it was part of the air, part of the land itself. My heart raced and I slammed my foot on the gas. I didn't care if I was speeding. I didn't care about anything except getting away from that thing. The truck shot forward and I didn't stop. Not even when the road straightened out, not even when the figure was out of sight. My hands were shaking, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I couldn't breathe. I kept my eyes on the road, but all I could think about was that thing. That thing that wasn't a person, that shouldn't have been there. When I finally made it home, I didn't stop at the house. I parked the truck by the barn and just sat there. The engine was still running, the sound of it like a distant hum in the quiet of the evening. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I had seen, but I knew one thing. I couldn't go back down that road. I couldn't face whatever that thing was. That was the last time I drove that stretch of road. And it's been the last time I've been anywhere near it at night. There's a weight to that place now. A heaviness in the air that I can't shake. Every time I drive past that part of the road during the day, I feel a tightness in my chest. I can't explain it, but I know that whatever it was, it's still there, waiting. I haven't told anyone about it. I'm not sure I could, even if I wanted to. Who would believe me? It's just another one of those things that's easier to keep to yourself. But I can't forget it. Every time I pass by that spot, I see it in my mind's eye, standing there, watching, waiting for someone else to stop. I don't know what it wants, but I do know this. Whatever it is, it's not human. I don't go that way anymore. I won't. Not as long as I live, and I don't think I'll ever be able to forget what I saw. My name's Hank Whitaker, and I'm from a little place called Sierra Blanca, Texas. It's a speck of dust on a map if you're looking closely enough, with maybe 100 folks who call it home. The kind of town where the wind never stops blowing, and the heat can make the road shimmer in the distance like a mirage. There's a lot of open space here, a lot of quiet, and a lot of nothing, and that's how most of us like it. You get used to the stillness. You learn to appreciate the silence. especially when you've lived here as long as I have. But that silence, sometimes it feels like it's just waiting for something to break it, something waiting to step out from the shadows. I've spent most of my life here, working as a mechanic at the old garage down by the tracks. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest. I fix whatever people drag in. Old trucks, busted up cars, tractors that have seen better days. Life's simple here. You work, you eat, you sleep, and you go about your business. But sometimes when the sun starts to set and the shadows get long, the quiet feels heavier. And on one of those nights I learned the hard way that there's a kind of silence that isn't just empty air. It's the kind that holds something inside it. It was a Thursday in early October when it happened. The air had a bite to it, a cool breeze that was a welcome relief after the heat of summer. I'd been working late at the shop, just finishing up on a truck that had been parked there for the past couple of weeks. The last of the sunlight was disappearing behind the hills and the moon was already rising high, casting long, eerie shadows over the dirt roads. I figured I'd head home, grab a bite to eat, maybe sit on the porch and listen to the coyotes in the distance. It was just another evening, or at least it should have been. I took the back road home that night, the one that runs along the edge of the canyon. It's a road I've driven 1,000 times. No big deal. You pass the old mill on your left, the dry creek bed on your right, and then the road twists a little before it leads up toward the ridge where my place is. It's quiet up there. The kind of quiet where you can almost hear the earth settling beneath your feet. But on this night, there was something different about it. The first thing I noticed was the air. It was thick, almost like it was holding its breath. I rolled the windows down to get some fresh air, but it didn't help. It felt like the world was pressing in on me, like the land itself was watching, waiting for something to happen. But it wasn't just the air. It was the road too, the way it stretched out in front of me, like it was going on forever. I'd been down this road 100 times, but tonight it felt endless. Like it wasn't the same road I was used to. I passed the mill like I always do, but when I got a little farther down, I saw something in the distance. It was just a figure standing off to the side of the road in the shadows, just barely visible. At first, I thought it was just a person walking home from the next town over. It happens sometimes. But then I realized it was standing too still, not moving at all. I slowed down instinctively, my grip tightening on the wheel. I figured I'd get closer, see if they needed help. But as I did, the figure didn't seem any closer. It was like it was waiting for me to get close. And as I drove closer still, I felt that same pressure, that same sense of something being wrong. I don't know why, but I stopped the truck right there, a few feet from where the figure was standing. My heart was racing and I didn't even know why. I couldn't make sense of it. I should have just driven on, kept going, but I didn't. I was too curious, I guess. Too drawn in by that feeling that something was about to happen. The figure didn't move. It just stood there in the shadows. And as I sat there staring at it, I felt the weight of the silence press against me harder. I didn't hear anything, no crickets, no wind, not even the sound of my own breathing. Just the stillness. Then as I stared at it, it shifted. Not like it turned to look at me, but like it changed shape, like it grew somehow. Like it was stretching upward. My heart jumped in my chest, and for a moment I thought I was losing my mind. The figure didn't look like a person anymore. It was bigger, taller, too tall. It was as if the shadows around it were bending and warping, and the figure was stretching with them, growing more and more unnatural. I knew I had to get out of there. I don't know why I didn't move sooner, but the fear hit me like a ton of bricks. I slammed the truck into gear and hit the gas. The engine roared to life and I sped away, not looking back, not daring to look back. But as I did, I felt something else. A chill creeping up my spine, the unmistakable feeling that something was following me. Something that I couldn't see but knew was there, just out of my sight. The road seemed to stretch on longer than it ever had before, and my mind raced. Was it still there? Was it just in my head? I made it home without any more strange occurrences. I parked the truck, went inside, and locked the door behind me. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I couldn't shake the thought that whatever I had seen, whatever that thing was, it was still out there somewhere, waiting. I didn't sleep much that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. The tall, shadowy figure, its shape shifting in the darkness, its eyes locked on me, even though I never saw them. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to go back and see if I could figure out what had happened the night before. Maybe it had been a trick of the light, a hallucination caused by the tiredness of the day. But when I drove down the road, there was nothing. Nothing but the same old stretch of dirt and brush. The mill, the dry creek bed, the road that curved toward home. It was as if nothing had ever happened at all, But I know what I saw. I felt it, that thing was real. And every time I drive that road now, especially at night, I feel that same unease, that pressure in the air like something is waiting for me. Something is watching. I'm not sure what it wants or why it showed itself to me that night, but I know this. I haven't been down that stretch of road since the night I saw it, and I don't plan on it. I don't know if it was a ghost, a spirit, or something else altogether. But I know one thing for sure. I won't be the one to find out. I haven't gone back down that road since, and I don't think I ever will. Whatever I saw that night, it's still out there, waiting, watching, and I don't think it will ever let me forget.